Hello, everyone. Welcome to Literary Journeys with River. In today's video, we bring you an illustrated summary of Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. Remember, this is just a summary and not the complete book. Join me as we discover the thrilling adventures of Violet Sorrengail at the ruthless Basgiath War College. Let's get started. First part, Chapter 1. In the year 628 after our unification, Artia was devastated by dragon fire, marking the end of the separatist movement. Those who escaped survived, while others were buried under the ruins. In this context, Violet finds herself in the massive kitchen of Orisha's fortress, observing her older brother, Brennan, who is surprisingly alive. Nibbling on a delicious honey cookie, Violet still cannot process all the recent revelations, the existence of the venom, Brennan's survival, and the persistence of Artia. Brennan, now with a more mature and rugged appearance, is as protective as ever, insisting that Violet eat something before taking her to see her dragons. Despite the changes, Brennan maintains that essence that makes him recognizable as the brother Violet remembers, providing a touch of normalcy amid the chaos. In the conversation, Brennan mentions his new rank and surname, Azure, revealing that he had to change his identity for security reasons and that his promotion was accelerated by the death of his superiors. The atmosphere in the fortress is bustling, and the conversations in the hallway reveal the constant activity and strategic concerns of the rebels. Violet, determined not to wait any longer, follows her brother through the majestic main hall of the fortress, an impressive place with polished stairs and windows that let in the morning light. Arriving at an assembly meeting, Violet listens attentively to the discussions. The leaders debate the critical situation they are in and the need for weaponry to face the growing threat of the venom. The tension in the room is palpable when the possibility of returning to Basgiath to obtain the necessary luminaria to forge weapons is raised. Brennan insists on seeking a diplomatic solution, while other assembly members, like Suri, suggest more drastic and risky measures. During the meeting, it is revealed that the cadets, including Violet, are in a precarious position. Suri and other members question Violet's loyalty and the security she represents, suggesting she should be locked up due to the secrets she knows. Brennan and Xaden defend Violet, arguing that her bond with the dragons and her capabilities are crucial for their cause. Finally, Xaden insists that the decision to return should be made by the 8 cadets together and not imposed by the assembly. With that, Xaden, Imogen, and Bodhi withdraw, leaving Violet with Brennan. She faces the mountain of questions accumulated during 6 years of absence and secrets, feeling that her life has taken a complete turn in a short period. Chapter 2. In the heart of the Ryerson House Valley, a place warmed by hot springs and home to the legendary dragons Kodaf and Tern, lies a site full of history and power. Brennan and Violet are in a private meeting, a moment charged with emotions and revelations. Brennan, after 6 years of absence and presumed death, reveals the reasons for his disappearance. Guilt and relief mix in him as he faces his sister, who still struggles with the conflicting feelings of pain and joy at his reappearance. Brennan explains how he survived an attack thanks to the dragons and the network of caves in the valley that hid them along with other survivors. Violet, still furious and hurt for being left behind, vehemently asks about his disappearance and his new mission. Brennan reveals that he is fighting against the darkness threatening Navarre, a conflict larger than Violet imagined, and that their mother's involvement in all this is murkier than it seems. Meanwhile, the valley itself is a scene of activity and preparation. The dragons, both young and veteran, play a crucial role in the defense against the venom, dark beings that threaten to destroy their world. Maps and strategies paint a picture of desperation and urgency, with red and orange flags marking conflict zones and enemy advances. The interaction between Brennan and Violet is tense and emotional. She discovers that her mother not only knew of his survival, but that Brennan has been secretly working to protect them all. The revelation that the Venin are not just a distant threat, but a present reality shakes Violet deeply. Brennan's strategy involves not just military strength, but also seeking ancient weapons and lost knowledge in the archives, complicating their situation further. The conversation between the siblings becomes more personal when Violet mentions her relationship with Xaden and the new dynamic that entails. Brennan, protective and still remorseful, tries to assure her that they are doing the right thing, although the decisions they face are dangerous and difficult. Finally, attention shifts to Andarna, the young dragon who has grown rapidly due to the intensive use of her magical energy. Her new appearance, with black scales and an impressive size, symbolizes the change and growth all the characters are experiencing. However, Andarna faces difficulties adapting to her new body, adding a layer of complexity and urgency to their situation. The narrative culminates in a crucial decision. They must return to Basgiath, despite the danger, to protect their companions and continue fighting for their survival. Graduation looms, an event that could change the fate of everyone. Chapter 3. Dawn at Basgiath finds the flight field shrouded in twilight, deserted and silent. The nearby mountains offer refuge for the flock trying to remain unnoticed as they fly towards their destination. Tern, with his wings beating at a steady rhythm, has been flying nonstop for almost 18 hours from Artia, and the tension is palpable. The mission is urgent: to bring Andarna to the valley without being detected to protect the dragon hatchlings. Tern explains to Violet the delicate balance between dragons and humans, a relationship forged over 600 years ago out of mutual necessity against the Venin. Violet reflects on recent betrayals and trust as they prepare to land on the flight field. Tern's descent is quick and precise. Violet holds on tightly, ready for any eventuality. After touching down, Tern and Scale take Andarna to the valley, leaving her with Xaden to face the next phase of their plan. Walking together towards the quadrant, Violet and Xaden discuss the betrayals and the need for mutual trust. Despite the tension between them, the connection is undeniable. The quadrant slowly awakens as Violet and Xaden head to their rooms. The encounter with Rhiannon and Riddoch, Violet's close friends, adds a touch of humanity to the situation, although the necessary lies and secrets to protect them weigh on Violet's conscience. She hands Rhiannon some important letters, trusting her to keep them safe. As they move on, Xaden and Violet discuss the need to lie and protect others, even if it means keeping secrets. The conversation reveals Xaden's internal struggle and his desire to open up to Violet, although the situation and responsibilities complicate things. Trust is a delicate issue, and both must find a way to reconcile their feelings with the reality of the war and revolution they are immersed in. Finally, they prepare for graduation, an event that promises to be tense and potentially dangerous. The formation begins, and the list of the dead is read aloud. The tension increases as Xaden and the others move to the center of the rotunda, ready to face any challenge that comes their way. Violet's determination to survive and protect her loved ones is clear, and the scene concludes with a mix of hope and fear for what is to come. Chapter 4. Violet's heart pounded as she crossed the courtyard of Basgiath towards the platform, led by Xaden. Each of Xaden's steps was firm and full of anger, radiating a confidence Violet tried to emulate. The sound of their boots on the gravel mingled with the surprised murmurs of the cadets. Captain Fitzgibbons, his eyes wide, dropped the list of the dead upon seeing them alive. Commander Panchek reacted similarly, gaping, while Violet's mother and Colonel Edo stood up, stunned. Violet saw Jazinia among the scribes, who quickly conveyed relief at her survival. Edo's, with flushed cheeks, watched them closely, assessing who had returned. Violet's mother's gaze briefly turned proud before returning to her usual professional stance. This wasn't part of Ito's plan. The tension in the air was palpable as Xaden began to speak, challenging the colonel. Xaden told a story of a griffin attack during their mission to Athabine, a carefully constructed lie to protect the truth. Violet, following his lead, narrated her version, describing the ambush and the deaths of Liam and Soleil. Violet's mother listened, seemingly convinced, while Ito's remained suspicious. With orders in hand, Violet's mother reprimanded Ito's for his lack of judgment. Xaden and Violet managed to maintain their cover. The tension eased as Violet's mother ordered the list of the dead to be corrected and the graduation to proceed. The frost in the platform dissipated as Colonel Ito's withdrew, defeated. The quadrant watched in silence as Xaden and Violet rejoined the formation. Ito's, humiliated, tried one last threat, but Xaden neutralized it with his usual aplomb. The formation continued with the reading of the names of the fallen, including Liam and Soleil, and the graduation proceeded. The ceremony was brief and formal. The third-year cadets received their orders and were given until the next morning to depart. Violet, along with her friends Rhiannon and Riddick, prepared to face the next year with new challenges and responsibilities. Uncertainty about the future enveloped her, but the determination to survive and thrive remained her guide. Chapter 5. Riders celebrate as fiercely as they fight, leaving everything on the battlefield. The Basgiath meeting hall was packed as the sun set, with cadets gathered around tables full of food and drinks. In this atmosphere of camaraderie and joy, there were no distinctions of rank. All were equal. Violet felt slightly dizzy from the lemonade with liquor and the 2 stars on her shoulder indicating her second year at Basgiath. Riddick, sitting next to her, dreamed of the privileges of the second year, such as being able to visit Chantera, a village that had been off-limits to riders due to past incidents. Rhiannon, Nadine, and Sawyer also shared their expectations for the new year, while joking and laughing. The table was a bustle of voices and laughter, a marked contrast to the constant tension and danger they had experienced. Quinn and Imogen joined the conversation, adding their perspectives and fueling the general enthusiasm. Despite the festive atmosphere, Violet felt guilty about the secrets she kept, especially regarding what had happened in Rezsun. Imogen, sensing her discomfort, stepped in to answer her companion's questions about the Griffins, describing the experience with sincerity and raising a glass in honor of Liam, to which everyone responded with a solemn toast. The shadow of the bond with Xaden enveloped her, and as she looked, she saw him on the other side of the hall, watching her. She excused herself and made her way towards him, aware that he was preparing to leave. Xaden, with his usual confidence, invited her for a walk. Violet followed him, trying to understand her own feelings and the complicated relationship between them. During their conversation, Xaden maintained his stance of protecting certain secrets, something that irritated Violet. However, both knew their paths were intertwined, and Xaden promised to earn her trust in his own way. When they reached the rotunda, they encountered Colonel Ito's and Major Varish, who would be the new vice commander. Varish, a cruel and meticulous man, handed Violet and Xaden their new orders, revealing that Xaden would be sent to the front and that Violet would have permission to fly to his location every 14 days. Colonel Ito's, with a sarcastic smile, insinuated that secrets were useless as tools of extortion, and Xaden calmly collected the missives, preparing for the uncertain future that awaited them. Chapter 6. The nausea in Violet's stomach had nothing to do with the lemonade. She was convinced that Colonel Ito's had just hinted he was capable of killing them. Xaden, with unsettling calm, responded that they kept no secrets. Ito's, with an affable and disturbing smile, warned Violet to be careful with the stories she shared, suggesting she wouldn't bear to see her mother lose another daughter. Energy surged in Violet, threatening to overflow. Xaden led her out of the building, where a lightning bolt struck 10 meters from them, raising the gravel. Nearby cadets scattered with long faces at her lack of control. Xaden, calmly, commented that alcohol didn't hinder her seal and that, fortunately, everything around them was made of stone. Xaden explained that he had no other choice when choosing the South Wing, specifically Samara, where they would be a day's flight apart. He warned her not to get involved in anything Bodhi and the others did, as all eyes would be on her. Xaden promised he would be back in 7 days, but until then, she couldn't fully trust anyone else. Despite his words, Violet felt torn by the distance that would separate them. Xaden pulled her close in what seemed like a goodbye hug, reminding her to make the most of the time they would spend together. He assured her that if anything important happened, they would know through their dragons. Xaden, aware that the cadets were watching them, asked her to play along and not be swayed by the lust of the moment. He would trust her with his life, but he needed her full trust. The farewell was painful, with Violet trying to maintain her composure as Xaden walked away. Rhiannon then appeared, with a letter in hand and a contained smile. Violet, still struggling with her emotions, learned that Eidos would be her new wing leader, but the good news was that Rhiannon had been promoted to platoon leader. Violet's joy for her friend was genuine, and they both celebrated the news with their companions. Rhiannon, now platoon leader, gave them a simple but powerful order: live. Smiling, Violet wished it were that easy. Chapter 7. Riddick and Violet sit together in a U-shaped classroom on the 3rd floor, filled with second-year cadets. They prepare for a new subject, orientation, while the bustle outside reveals the arrival of civilians for recruitment day. Riddick and Rhiannon discuss the unknown aspects of the classroom, and Nadine joins the conversation with a bandaged hand, explaining how she twisted it the previous night. The classroom falls silent when a tall rider, Professor Grady, enters and introduces himself. He explains that the survival course for riders, SCR, is essential to learn how to survive behind enemy lines if separated from their dragons. Grady emphasizes that the survival and interrogation tests will be surprising and that their goal is to prepare the cadets for the hell they will face. Hearing about the possibility of torture, Violet feels her heart race, aware of the sensitive information she holds. The class ends with a sense of unease and fear among the cadets. Later, Violet heads to the archives in search of calm. There, she finds Jazinia, her friend from the days they trained to be scribes. Jazinia is working on bookbinding, and their conversation reveals Violet's longing for peaceful days and the need to find crucial information about the foundation of Basgiath and its protections. Violet lies to Jazinia, claiming she needs information for a history debate, and Jazinia, trusting, hands her 2 ancient volumes. Violet knows that the key to protecting Artia lies in those texts, and that she must discover it before the protections become insufficient to save them. Chapter 8. Violet is in the War College Tower, observing the arrival of candidates for recruitment day. The line of candidates stretches as the bells mark the 9th hour, and Violet avoids looking at the faces of the aspirants to avoid adding more nightmares to those she already has. Rhiannon and Nadine accompany her, commenting on the candidates' nervousness. Dane, standing a few steps away from Violet, acts as wing leader, monitoring the new recruits. Although he has tried to talk to Violet, she has deliberately avoided him, resenting his past actions. The candidates begin climbing the spiral staircase, and Violet focuses on her task of closing the final list before the aspirants cross the parapet. The first candidate, Jory Buell, presents herself nervous but determined, while Dane gives her the order to proceed. Violet, remembering her own passage over the parapet the previous year, watches with a mix of anxiety and resignation. Over the next few hours, Violet records the names of the candidates, including some particularly aggressive ones. Among them stands out Eric Greycastle, a name invented by a young man Violet recognizes as Cam, the third son of King Towery. Despite the surprise and concern, Violet allows Eric to continue, aware of the danger his presence represents. The process becomes even more intense when Sloane Mary, Liam's younger sister, arrives at the tower. Sloane, full of hatred towards Violet, accuses her of her brother's death. Violet, with no other choice, gives her some advice on crossing the parapet and assures her she will keep the promise made to Liam to look after his sister. Finally, 71 candidates fail to cross the parapet. During the formation, the wing leaders assign the new cadets to their platoons. Sloane is initially assigned to Wing 1, but Dane moves her to the 2nd Platoon, Flame Section, alongside Violet. Tension rises when Solas, Major Varish's dragon, attacks a group of deserters, killing several cadets, including some who were bonded. Tern, Violet's dragon, intervenes to protect her and establishes his dominance over Solas. Violet, injured but alive, faces Varish's wrath, knowing she has made a new enemy. Chapter 9. In the mountains of the Steel Ridge Range, the green dragons of the Uainloidsig lineage, known for their sharp intellect and rational appearance, offered their ancestral breeding grounds for the sake of the dragons. It was then that the first 6 wove the protections of Navarre into what is now Basgiath War College. The next morning, Violet wakes up with cold sweats, her body full of adrenaline from a nightmare. She quickly gets ready, bandaging her knees and dressing in the summer uniform over her armor. She descends the spiral staircase, tasting bile in her mouth. The first-year cadets rush to complete their tasks, while the courtyard is quiet and the air smells of humidity. Imogen joins Violet, asking her why she runs every morning. Violet explains that she is bad at running long distances and needs to improve her endurance. Imogen assures her that in time they will succeed, and both head out for a run. Later, in the first battle report class of the year, Violet sits with her platoon in the heights of the classroom. They observe the first years, who occupy more than a third of the space. Professor De Vera and Colonel Markham present the reports of recent Griffin attacks on the border. Tactics of the enemy are debated, and questions are raised about the attacks, including the possibility that the enemy knew the outpost was empty during the war games. Rhiannon, Imogen, and Violet discuss the situation in the healer quadrant, suspecting that they are hiding something. Violet feels torn between helping her friends and the marked, while trying to stay true to her principles. During the physical evaluation, Violet and her platoon observe the matches between the first-year students. Sloane, Liam's sister, shows her hatred towards Violet and faces Eric Greycastle on the mat. Amid the tension, a first-year student from Wing 2 approaches Nadine, claiming to be Violet Sorrengail. Without warning, he breaks Nadine's neck, leaving everyone in shock and horror. Chapter 10. In the Rider Quadrant, it is not uncommon for some cadets to be hired to kill others. Violet watches in horror as the first-year student drops Nadine's lifeless body to the ground, her head twisted at an impossible angle. Rhiannon runs to her side, screaming her name, while the attacker claims to be Violet Sorrengail. Without thinking, Violet draws her daggers and throws them at the giant, who manages to block them with his arms. Despite the pain in her legs, Violet charges at him and manages to cut the tendons in one of his knees, causing him to fall. However, the attacker quickly recovers, pulling the daggers from his arms and throwing them at Violet. On the ground, she fights back with all her strength, finally stabbing him in the kidney until the giant falls dead on top of her. Dane arrives and asks if she is okay, but Violet, aware that Eidos is behind this attack, resists accepting his help. She picks up her daggers and watches as the bodies of Nadine and the attacker are taken away. She feels deep sorrow for Nadine's death, but forces herself to stay strong in front of the other cadets. The physical evaluation session continues, and Violet focuses on observing Sloane, Liam's sister, who shows limited combat skills. Beaten and in pain, Violet retreats to her room, where she finds Xaden waiting for her. He examines her with concern and helps her clean her wounds. Violet tells him that Eidos is behind the attack, and Xaden promises to protect her. Later, Violet and Xaden discuss life in Samara and the growing harshness of their lives as riders. Xaden hands her a letter before leaving again. Violet is left holding the letter, feeling a mix of relief and sadness at his departure. Chapter 11. Violet is in a moment of reflection as she prepares for the day. Her friend Bodhi remains a constant in her life, much like a brother, always by her side. She receives a letter that she has read so many times she has it memorized. Though the letter contains nothing dangerous, it provides her with comfort and details about the author's life. During her morning stretches, Violet and her companion Imogen exchange words about Violet's happiness. Despite recent difficulties, Violet has found moments of peace without nightmares. Imogen, always direct, points out that Violet seems to avoid her other friends and prefers to keep the conversation light. On their way to breakfast, Violet notices Jazinia, a scribe friend who seems to be hiding. Jazinia hands her an ancient book on the history of the first writers and asks for help translating phrases in ancient Lucaric. Violet, though surprised by the request, agrees to help her. However, Imogen is suspicious of the presence of a scribe in the writer's quadrant. As they continue their routine, Rhiannon, another friend of Violet, delivers the mail. Violet receives a letter from her sister Mira but feels disappointed not to receive news from someone else she was expecting. The conversation turns to the complexity of relationships and the lack of sincerity she has experienced, especially with Xaden, leading her to end that relationship. In the flight field, Violet and her friends watch the dragons in formation. The spectacle is imposing and beautiful. The conversation shifts to the censorship of Myra's letter and the constant dangers they face, including assassination attempts. While practicing flight maneuvers, Major Varish approaches Violet with uncomfortable questions about her golden dragon, Andarna. Tension rises when Violet and Bodhi are stopped for an inspection. Varish and his companions search Violet's bag, looking for something incriminating, but find nothing relevant. Tern, Violet's dragon, is ready to protect her if necessary. The situation resolves, but leaves Violet frustrated and angry at being used as a tool in an experiment without her knowledge. Finally, Violet and Tern prepare for the flight to the front, with Tern carrying important supplies. Despite the constant tension and danger, Violet feels determined to continue, motivated by her goal and the desire to reunite with Xaden. Chapter 12. Violet arrives at the Samara outpost, an isolated fortress in the Espen Mountains known for its harshness. Tern, her dragon, accompanies her and warns her about the cruelty of the place and the proximity of a flock of enemies on the other side of the mountains. Despite her confidence in the shields she has learned to control, Violet feels the tension in the air, aggravated by the intense magical protections surrounding the fortress. Upon entering, she finds a desolate and militarized environment. The fortress is imposing, made of red stone and crowded with infantry soldiers. Violet, accustomed to the more spacious Basgiath, feels out of place in this oppressive setting. She finds Xaden's room empty, but the residual energy of the protections indicates he is nearby. Violet follows the feeling of their bond and descends to the basement of the fortress, where she finds a room packed with riders. All are focused on a fight in the central pit, where Xaden is battling another rider, Jarrett, for a weekend pass. The tension in the air is palpable, and Violet, unable to take her eyes off Xaden, watches how he moves with agility and precision, dodging blows and delivering others with lethal accuracy. The fight is intense and brutal. Xaden, shirtless, displays every sculpted muscle and scar with calculated movements. His agility and strength are evident as he toys with Jarrett, measuring each blow. The scene evokes in Violet a mix of desire and admiration, her attraction to him intensifying with each movement. The combat culminates with Xaden victorious, but not before Jarrett lands a blow to his jaw, a reminder of the intensity of the fight. Violet and Xaden meet, and the connection between them is undeniable. The fight has awakened in her a mix of emotions she cannot ignore. After the fight, Xaden and Violet retreat to his room. The tension between them becomes intimate, charged with desire and an internal struggle for Violet between giving herself completely to him or keeping her reservations. Xaden, aware of his own attraction and past wounds, kisses her with restrained passion, showing her that his desire goes beyond simple physical contact. While Violet takes a bath and cleans herself, Xaden continues preparing weapons, a reminder of the constant threat they face. Afterward, they discuss the power-imbued daggers, a crucial tool in their fight against the Venom. Xaden explains the importance and process of creating these weapons, revealing the depth of strategy and preparation needed for their survival. The conversation turns personal when Xaden expresses his desire to regain Violet's trust, insisting that their relationship should not be based solely on sex. He longs for a deeper connection, a bond that transcends the challenges they face. Violet, caught between her desire and the need to protect herself emotionally, struggles to find a balance. Despite the tension and challenges, the connection between Violet and Xaden strengthens. The fortress of Samara, with its harshness and isolation, becomes the backdrop for a relationship that must overcome constant tests, both internal and external. Violet, with her determination and growing abilities, prepares to face whatever comes, supported by Xaden, whose presence is an anchor amid the storm. Chapter 13. The next day, Violet returns to Basgiath, exhausted after a long flight from Samara. Upon arrival, Taryn informs her that Kar and Varish are waiting for her at the practice grounds. The threat of imminent punishment for not forcing Andarna to participate in flight maneuvers weighs on her. The situation turns brutal when Varish orders Violet to produce lightning without rest. Despite Kar's warning about the risk of burning out, Varish insists. Violet, exhausted and on the verge of her physical and mental limits, struggles to comply with the orders, fearful of the consequences if she does not. Each lightning bolt drains more of her energy and overheats her body until she finally collapses, unable to sustain the power coursing through her. Taryn, furious but helpless, watches as Violet fights to stay conscious and avoid being consumed by the power. The final lightning bolt leaves her completely drained and on the brink of collapse. When Varish finally releases her, Kar intervenes to ensure Violet receives urgent care. Taryn quickly takes her to the nearby river, submerging her in the cold water to cool her overheated body. The contrast between the searing heat and the icy water is painful but necessary to save her. Imogen, Bodhi, and Aya find her by the river, worried about her condition. Violet, weakened but determined, assures them she will be fine. With the help of her friends, she manages to return to the dorms, but the threat of Varish still looms over her. In the following days, Violet continues to deal with the physical aftermath of her punishment. During a training session, Sloane, Liam's sister, struggles to improve her combat skills, but is repeatedly knocked down. The harshness of life at Basgiath and the expectations of the instructors make Violet reflect on her own survival and that of her friends. In the gym, Violet faces the tension of her situation and the need to protect Andarna. As she watches Sloane, she recognizes the difficult position she is in and decides to help her despite the unwritten rules of the quadrant. Friendship and loyalty to Liam motivate her to intervene, seeking a way to give Sloane a fair chance. During a conversation with Imogen, Violet learns about the death of Yasik, a second-year student, and suspects that Markham might be involved. Paranoia and distrust towards the authorities increase, making Violet even more cautious. The tension in the quadrant is palpable. Violet, aware of the constant danger, remains vigilant and strives to stay calm. However, when Riddick approaches from behind, she reacts instinctively, almost injuring him with her dagger. The adrenaline and paranoia of being attacked again push her to the limit, and the humiliation of almost hurting a friend leaves her shaken. Finally, as they head to physics class, Violet, Riddick, Rhiannon, and Sawyer are ambushed. Someone shouts and Violet is covered with a sack, rendered unconscious. The tension and danger at Basgiath have reached a new level, and Violet faces an even greater challenge as she fights to survive and protect those she loves. Chapter 14. Violet wakes up abruptly, with a sharp smell filling her lungs. Disoriented, she sits up and sees Rhiannon, Sawyer, and Riddick beside her, all just as confused. She soon realizes they are in a forest with other cadets, but the situation is unsettling. The mental connection with Tarn and Andarna is blocked, and they cannot communicate with their dragons. Professor Grady explains that they are in a joint land navigation exercise, combining riders and infantry. The infantry, led by the captain, appears rigid and disciplined, contrasting with the riders, who are more individualistic and varied in their appearance and attitude. Grady and the captain hand out maps to both groups and instruct them to find an extraction point and secure the area. They also warn them that other groups are in the forest and that their dragons will hunt them while they try to complete the mission. The tension rises when Grady mentions that they have been drugged with a mixture that dulls their bonds with the dragons and their seals. The groups begin their march, but conflicts quickly arise between the riders and the infantry. Kelvin, an arrogant infantry cadet, repeatedly clashes with Rhiannon and Riddick, questioning their decisions and authority. Despite the tensions, they continue advancing, trying to orient themselves with the maps and discussing their location. The situation becomes critical when they encounter an orange dragon, Bade, blocking their path. Violet and the other riders move to the front, protecting the infantry and healers. The tension is palpable as Bade watches them, and Violet gives instructions not to provoke the dragon. Suddenly, Gwen, an infantry cadet, panics and runs. Tomas, the infantry platoon leader, tries to save her, but Bade breathes fire and consumes them both. The group is shocked by Tomas's death, and the atmosphere fills with fear and despair. Rhiannon, furious, reprimands the infantry for not following instructions and provoking the tragedy. Tomas's death highlights the severity of the situation and the need to work together to survive. The group, now more aware of the real danger, faces the harsh reality of their mission and the constant threat of the dragons that stalk them. Chapter 15. The sun has set, and Violet and her group have yet to reach the extraction point. They feel frustrated and exhausted, with blisters on their feet and bone aches from sleeping on the ground. Land navigation has been a total failure, and their stubbornness has cost them Tomas's life. As she sits to rest, Violet reflects on the differences between the infantry and the riders. The infantry, though larger in number, does not die at the same rate as the riders, but the war will soon change that. Riddick arrives to change the guard and asks Violet if she has eaten. She replies that she will eat something later. Dyer, an infantry cadet, brings her a plate of roasted rabbit in gratitude for saving his life, though Violet assures him he owes her nothing. However, Dire insists that he has a life debt to her. Rhiannon sits next to Violet and confronts her, pointing out that she has noticed how Violet has been isolating herself from everyone since they returned. She reminds her that she hasn't seen Andarna, that she goes running with Imogen, and that she barely talks about Xaden or the war games. Violet tries to deny her observations, but Rhiannon asks her not to insult her with lies and assures her she will be there when she is ready to talk. That night, Violet doesn't sleep well, though at least she doesn't have nightmares. The next morning, a convoy of horses and wagons arrives with the instructors, who provide them with water and inform them of their failure in the exercise. Professor Grady tells them they were in Haddon Forest, but they failed to work as a team to figure it out. Despite the disappointment, he promises that next time they will have supplies. The bond with the dragons is restored, and Violet feels the power coursing through her veins again. Tarn, her dragon, lands near her, and though she is tired, she manages to mount him. The feeling of vulnerability and isolation disappears, but the discomfort of their bonds being manipulated persists. Rhiannon notes that strange things are happening this year, like the guarded infirmary doors and the elixirs to dull their bonds. Tarn assures Violet that he was able to see Scale, though only for a couple of hours, as he was unwilling to be away from her for longer. Violet feels her instincts screaming that something is wrong and fears they won't be able to see Scale and Xaden the following week as they hope. Chapter 16. Violet returns to Basgiath in time to visit the archives. She decides to dedicate her time to research since she cannot see Xaden. Upon arrival, she finds Jazinia and Aoife working. Jazinia offers to show Violet Aoife's notebook containing annotations from the land navigation exercise. Violet accepts and observes the precision of the details with amazement. Jazinia explains that the hardest part is reflecting the truth and not just an interpretation. Violet, curious, asks Jazinia about the book Yassic requested before his death. Jazinia reveals that Yassic was looking for a report on a border attack that doesn't exist, and that he elevated the request believing it would help him. Violet realizes something else is happening, and that the archives might be intentionally incomplete. Jazinia offers to help Violet in her search and promises to find texts on how the first 6 established the protections. However, she warns that she can only risk disappearing one book at a time and that she will work in the archives on Saturdays when they are quieter. On Monday, Rhiannon asks Violet if she thinks Sloane has any chance in the upcoming challenge. Violet assures her that she will win but keeps the last letter Xaden left her in her pocket. During the fight, Violet uses a trick with colorless powder to disorient Dasha and allow Sloane to win. Rhiannon and Imogen are surprised, but Violet explains that she did it because of the promise she made to Liam to take care of his sister. Jazinia gives Violet a classified book about the first 6, and Violet returns it in exchange for another text. She continues her research in secret while Professor Grady scolds them for their lack of cooperation in the exercises. The books, though interesting, do not reveal the crucial information she needs. Finally, Violet prepares to leave for Samara to see Xaden. Varish, accompanied by 2 henchmen, arrives to escort her to her dragon. Although she feels uncomfortable, Violet proceeds and feels relieved to mount Tarn. Upon arriving at Samara, she learns that Xaden has a 24-hour guard, and she does not have permission to move freely. Chapter 17. In this chapter, Violet continues facing the challenges and pressures of her training while trying to keep her relationships and secrets safe. Imogen warns her about the need to continue the flight maneuvers of her section, despite Varish and other instructors noticing Andarna's absence. On the way to battle report class, Imogen asks Violet about her relationship with Xaden, suggesting she should talk about her problems instead of isolating herself from her friends. Violet reveals that she has been receiving letters from Xaden, written in code, in which he also advises keeping their distance to protect each other. In Battle Report class, Professor Markham reads a letter Rhiannon received from her village. The letter warns about outsiders seeking refuge and the possibility that they bring death and destruction. Markham uses the letter to discuss the efficiency of propaganda and the role of civilians in wars, suggesting that the inhabitants of Poromil are spreading lies about dragon attacks. Violet struggles to contain her anger and frustration upon hearing these lies and is forced to leave the class to release the accumulated energy. Violet heads to the archives, where she meets Jazinia, who helps her hide her presence and return a book. Jazinia realizes that Violet is desperate to find information and offers to bring her a new selection of books that night. Violet accepts the help, aware of the risk it poses for both of them. Chapter 18. On Saturday morning, Xaden arrives unexpectedly early at Violet's room, surrounded by history books. His tired appearance reflects the long hours of flying and work, but Violet cannot help feeling happy to see him. Xaden jokes about her appearance and soon settles in the room, revealing a closeness that has been growing between them. Violet suggests he rest, but Xaden, instead of sleeping, starts to browse through the books scattered on the floor. Noticing the titles, he asks why she is investigating the first 6. Violet, trapped, admits she is looking for information to help defend Artia, the territory Xaden and the rebels protect. This revelation upsets Xaden, who fears for her safety. The tension between them increases when he realizes Violet has been researching classified materials with the help of a friend in the archives. During their argument, they are interrupted by Rhiannon and Riddick, who invite Violet out. The confrontation intensifies when Xaden expresses his frustration with the risks Violet is taking. Finally, Violet asks Xaden to accompany her to the archives to return the books to her friend Jazinia, though she fears his presence might scare her. Upon arriving at the archives, Jazinia is nervous but cooperates with Violet, providing her with more books on the ancient protections. Xaden, though wary, thanks Jazinia for her help. On the way back, the tension between Violet and Xaden persists. Xaden expresses his anger and concern for the risks Violet has assumed, while she accuses him of not fully trusting her. The argument culminates with Xaden leaving to meet Bodhi, leaving Violet frustrated and alone. When she wakes up the next day, she discovers Xaden did not spend the night with her and that his things are gone, causing her a deep sense of anxiety and sadness. Chapter 19. 2 days later, Violet crosses the flight field with her platoon, heading towards maneuvers. Varish and Kaori are there, watching. Varish, in particular, seems to delight in noticing Andarna's absence, increasing Violet's anxiety. She has been training hard, throwing lightning bolts until her arms feel like lead, without impressing her superiors. As the group approaches the claw section dragons, Rhiannon comments on Varish's attitude and his unsettling disposition. Violet's concern intensifies as she nears Tarn, aware of Varish's fixed gaze. Just as Violet is about to mount Tarn, Varish approaches her stealthily, causing Violet to instinctively draw her dagger. Tarn reacts, protecting Violet with his massive body and roaring with a force that echoes throughout the valley. Varish accuses Violet of not fulfilling her duty by not bringing Andarna, demanding punishment. Tarn, defending his rider, lunges at Salas, Varish's dragon, biting his neck and easily dominating him. The scene becomes tense and dangerous, with Varish forced to apologize on his knees before Violet. Varish's humiliation is evident, and though he leaves, the implicit threat remains. 3 nights later, Rhiannon accompanies Violet to the flight field, worried about the ongoing tension with Varish. During their conversation, Rhiannon insists on knowing the truth about Varish's punishments and Violet's emotional distance. Finally, Violet explodes, revealing her pain over Liam's death and the brutal reality they face as riders. The revelation is raw and devastating, leaving Rhiannon shocked. The situation worsens when Varsh appears unexpectedly, interrupting their conversation. Rhiannon and Violet are forced to undergo an inspection, increasing the pressure and danger in their environment. After Varsh leaves, Violet thanks Rhiannon for her support and acknowledges that the situation is far from ideal. The sincerity between them helps ease the tension a bit, but Varsh's threat and the pain of past experiences continue to weigh on Violet's heart. Chapter 20. Violet and Ternland in Samara, discussing how to meet the graduation requirements without endangering Violet's health. As she unbuckles and prepares to dismount, she feels the persistent pain in her body, a reminder of her constant efforts. Tern shows impatience, eager to reunite with Scale. As Violet walks towards the fortress, a company of infantry runs around her, almost trampling her. Upon reaching the courtyard, she meets Xaden, and their reunion is so intense that they kiss passionately. This moment of connection is interrupted by the arrival of Mira, Violet's sister, who watches the scene in surprise. Xaden, noticing Myra's presence, kisses Violet on the forehead and offers to carry her bags to her room, leaving them alone. The relationship between the sisters is strong and affectionate, despite the complications. Mira, concerned for Violet's safety, takes her to throw daggers in the outpost's gym. During this time, they discuss the reality of war and the dangers they face. Violet struggles with the desire to reveal the truth about Brennan and the war they are fighting but stops, fearing for everyone's safety. As they throw daggers, Violet tries to get information about Navarre's protections and Myra's capabilities. Mira explains how the protections work and the importance of the outposts. Although Mira is not fully aware of the secrets Violet seeks, her explanations help Violet better understand the situation. That night, Xaden joins Violet in bed, trying to talk without arguing. They both share their frustrations and fears, seeking common ground amid the war and betrayals. Xaden confesses his concern for the civilians trying to cross the border and the constant tension with Basgiath's authorities. Violet, for her part, admits how hard it is to trust him completely, even though she loves him deeply. In the middle of the night, as Xaden holds her, Violet finds a moment of peace and connection. Their relationship, though complicated and full of secrets, is also a refuge amid the chaos. They both understand that their bond is unique and special, and they must work together to overcome the difficulties they face. Chapter 21. Violet starts Thursday morning with her arm in a sling, immobilized due to a failed landing during the previous day's flight maneuvers. As she enters history class with Rhiannon and Riddick, she mentions that the healer's estimate she'll be in the sling for about 4 weeks, though she hopes it will be less. Riddick suggests Nolan's help, but Violet says there's a long waiting list. The history class begins with Professor De Vera replacing Professor Lavigne, who was left due to an attack on the East Wing that resulted in the death of Mason Sanborn, a recent graduate. The news affects Violet, who reflects on the possibility that Mason was killed to silence him, just like others who were on the mission to res Sun. De Vera conducts the lesson on the unification of Navarre and the sacrifices it entailed, such as the loss of local languages and cultures. Violet, along with other students, actively participates in the discussion, highlighting the cultural losses and personal sacrifices the provinces made to unify. Rhiannon also contributes her perspective, talking about the folklore that is lost with each generation. Later, in the gym, it's announced that there will be challenges on the mat, and the atmosphere fills with anticipation. Violet, with her arm immobilized, watches as the fights unfold. Suddenly, Dane challenges Violet, using his rank as wing leader to force her to face him despite her injury. The tension rises as Dane and Violet face off on the mat, and Violet must maintain her mental shields to protect her secrets. During the fight, Dane tries to talk to Violet, seeking information about what she saw in Athebyne. Despite the pain, Violet keeps her shields up and warns Dane not to steal her memories. Finally, Dane gives up, but not before revealing that it was Violet's mother who made the incisions on Xaden's back. Later, Rhiannon confronts Violet, trying to understand why Dane challenged her and what secrets she is hiding. Feeling pressured, Violet partially confesses that Dane stole a memory from her, but avoids giving more details. The conversation is interrupted when Eric arrives with a broken doll, and Violet accompanies him to the infirmary. On the way, Eric hints that he knows more than he appears to about the secrets and intrigues surrounding the Riders and the Marked. Upon reaching the tunnels, Violet realizes that Eric is aware of the situation with the Wyverns and the secrets surrounding Navarre. Eric's revelation that he knows the hidden details leaves Violet perplexed and aware that her allies are closer than she thought. Chapter 22. Fear chokes Violet as she runs across a yellow field, feeling a wave of death at her heels. She sees Tern and Andarna in danger, but before she can reach them, a hooded figure immobilizes her. This figure, of Venin, reveals its bony face and red eyes, proposing that she join him to live forever or face death. Violet refuses, and the wave of agony reaches her just before she wakes up, heart racing and dagger in hand. On Saturday, Xaden takes Violet to the Basgiath Forge, showing her a secret place and trusting her. On the way, Violet reveals to Xaden that she has found evidence that the first 6 carved the protective stone with their own hands, suggesting the existence of more similar stones elsewhere. However, they are intercepted by Major Varish and Professor Grady, who are taking Riddick, Rhiannon, and Sawyer for interrogation training. Despite Xaden's attempts to protect her, Violet knows she cannot avoid this fate and bids him farewell with a promise to be unbreakable. Varish, enjoying the control he has, threatens to cancel Violet's leave if she doesn't comply, but trusting Xaden, she lets herself be taken with the rest of her squad. As they part, Xaden reminds her that she is unbreakable, strengthening her determination for what lies ahead. Chapter 23. In the training facility, Violet and her squad face an intimidating environment, hidden in the hillside beneath the Quadrant's walls. The antechamber appears to be an ordinary office, but the adjoining chambers, with reinforced doors and steel-locked windows, reveal their true purpose. Professor Grady explains that, although the next 2 days will be purely instructional, they must prepare for a real scenario where they will be interrogated. He leaves food and drink, warning them that they must each share a secret. Rhiannon starts by confessing that she and Violet sneaked out last year to visit her family. Sawyer reveals he never told his parents he had to repeat a year, and Riddick admits he has a deep fear of snakes. Violet, searching for something significant, reveals that Navarre's infantry is killing poor Emil civilians at the border, something she overheard in Samara. When they are about to drink, Violet realizes the water smells the same as the one they were given before the land navigation course, meaning it will disconnect them from their dragons. They decide to fake the disconnection and empty their jugs into the toilet. Professor Grady returns and chains Riddick, Rhiannon, and Sawyer to the stone wall, leaving Violet in a wooden chair with shackles. 2 interrogators, a man and a woman, enter the room. The man, with a seal similar to Lieutenant Nora's, can perceive when they lie. The woman strikes Violet, causing pain and a cut on her cheek, then turns to the others, trying to divide them. The torture continues, with Violet receiving additional blows, while her companions also suffer. Although they try to remain calm, the uncertainty and pain exhaust them. During a brief break, Violet mentally contacts Xaden to confirm it is almost midnight. The interrogators return, and the man offers water in exchange for personal secrets, but everyone refuses. Finally, Major Varish enters the room, displaying a disturbing glee. Despite their efforts, the squad remains united. Varish decides to intervene personally, calling someone who terrifies Rhiannon. Dane Edos, the wing leader, enters the room. Chapter 24. Dane appears in Violet's line of sight, and her heart sinks upon seeing him examine her friends before approaching her. His face shows surprise at the bruises and swelling on Violet's eye. Meanwhile, Violet communicates to Xaden Dane's presence, and Xaden promises to head there, but Violet warns him that Varish seems to be testing a theory about the mixture that blocks bonds. She decides to strengthen her shields and block Xaden to protect her secrets. Dane, facing Varish, refuses to use his seal on Violet, claiming she is injured and cannot be subjected to interrogation evaluation. However, his refusal does not stop Varish, who strikes Violet on her dislocated shoulder, plunging her into the darkness of pain. Upon awakening, Violet finds Nolan watching her. Her shoulder has been repaired, and she learns that the interrogation will extend to the next day, with Varish determined to uncover her secrets. Nolan urges her to find a way to escape, leaving open the possibility of a getaway. Rhiannon and Violet crouch by the door, listening to Nolan and Varish's conversation about another patient needing attention. Taking advantage of Varish's temporary absence, they decide to act quickly. Rhiannon suggests Violet's life is in danger, and Sawyer and Riddick, though surprised, prepare to help. Sawyer uses his magic to melt the door hinges, and with a combined effort, they manage to open it. They exit the chamber, retrieve their weapons, and head for the main door, only to discover the lock is also magical and resistant to minor magic. Violet feels a vibration in her dagger when she approaches the lock, and placing it on the handle, the door miraculously opens. Though puzzled by how it happened, they waste no time and prepare to flee. Chapter 25. The cool morning air and the first rays of sunlight greet Violet and her squad as they run out of the cave, quickly advancing towards the tall grass covering the stretch between the cliffs and the trees. Rhiannon, surprised, asks Violet where she got the knives, to which she replies truthfully that Xaden had them prepared on purpose. Suddenly, Professor Grady blocks their path with a smile, leaving them bewildered. Rhiannon, without wasting time, charges towards him with her sword poised, demanding the patch they were promised for escaping. In the following days, Violet and Dane avoid looking at and talking to each other. During the interrogation, Violet discovers that it claimed another life, that of Sorrel, a talented archer from the 1st Platoon, bringing the death toll in the evaluations to 2. Entering battle report class, the usual murmur of cadets turns into a roar of whispers as they pick up pamphlets from their seats. Violet reads the shocking headline announcing the destruction of the city of Zolia in Poromil, supposedly under attack by a flock of blue dragons, causing 10,000 deaths. Disbelief and fear grip the classroom. Bodhi and Imogen, from the other end, exchange panicked looks with Violet, who realizes this information could cause chaos. The students, unsure of what to do, try to discern if the pamphlets are real or propaganda. Commander Markham, entering the room, attempts to discredit the information and calm the commotion, describing it as propaganda without an official seal, and asks the students to pass the pamphlets forward. Meanwhile, Violet and her squad discuss the veracity of the information and its possible implications. Markham changes the subject, revealing that they have kept Colonel Nolan's work secret for months. He enthusiastically announces the return of a fellow writer, Jack Barlow, who was supposedly crushed under a mountain but repaired by Nolan. Violet cannot believe it. Jack, whom she had killed during the war games, descends the stairs accompanied by Caroline Ashton. The classroom applauds and cheers his return. Jack appears almost humble as he looks directly at Violet, making it clear that it is him and not a fake. The threat he represents to Violet is instantly revived, while her friends doubt he has learned his lesson, foreseeing he will try to kill her again. Chapter 26. Rhiannon whispers a sarcastic thank you as everyone watches Jack Barlow. His half-smile almost seems sincere, and Violet, Riddick, and Sawyer remain silent as he nods at Violet before sitting down. Confused, her squad tries to comprehend the situation. Taryn confirms it is Jack and that Bate has hidden the truth for months. Violet, though trying to convince herself that Jack might have changed, decides not to lose sight of him. The guys, however, remain skeptical. The classroom atmosphere is tense, and murmurs spread among the cadets as De Vera mentions an unprecedented attack on a nearby outpost. Violet, hearing it is Samara, panics at the thought of her sister Mira and Zayden. Though De Vera assures there was only one serious injury and the 3 riders not patrolling successfully defended the outpost, anxiety overwhelms Violet. Desperate with uncertainty and fear, she decides she must leave. With her backpack on her shoulder, she ignores Markham's orders and leaves the classroom. The connection with Taryn strengthens, both feeling the urgency to be in Samara. As she climbs the stairs, Bodhi catches up to her and hands her his flight jacket, concerned for her safety. Grateful, Violet accepts the jacket and rushes to meet Taryn, determined to reach Samara as soon as possible. In the courtyard, Taryn is already waiting for her, impatient. Without wasting more time, Violet mounts Taryn, ready to face whatever awaits her in Samara, while Bodhi's words resonate in her mind. Go. And so she does, flying towards uncertainty with the hope of finding her loved ones safe. Chapter 27. Complete control over shields is crucial for any third-year rider, as in moments of extreme stress, the dragon's emotions can influence and even dominate the rider. Violet struggles with this challenge as she flies towards Samara, landing just before nightfall. The worry about the punishment awaiting her at Basgiath is minimal compared to her anxiety about Zayden. Taryn, dominated by his instincts, magnifies her emotions, leaving her in a state of panic. Upon arriving in Samara, the chaos and destruction are evident. Violet desperately searches for Zayden. Mira, unharmed, finds her first and reveals that Zayden is in the gym. Relieved to see her sister safe, she quickly heads to the gym, where she finds Zayden in the middle of a training session, unscathed and fighting against Garrick. The combination of relief and fury consumes her. When Zayden sees her, he stops the training and heads towards her, concerned. Violet, full of conflicting emotions, demands answers from him. He takes her to the gym's bathroom, where a stream of cold water helps her regain control of her shields and emotions. The ensuing conversation is intense, mixing confessions of need and desire with the tension of unspoken feelings. Zayden reveals that he was indeed injured, showing her a recent scar and confirming what Violet suspected. Zayden's sincerity in admitting that he needs her as much as she needs him finally breaks the barrier between them. Desire turns into a passionate and urgent encounter, a moment where both allow themselves to be vulnerable and real. After their intimacy, Zayden offers Violet several options, including staying there or accompanying him to the rendezvous point to deliver some daggers. Violet, eager to be with him and continue what they started, quickly prepares to go with him, making it clear that her priority is to be by his side. Chapter 28. Under the full moonlight, Violet and Zayden take advantage of being bonded riders to a pair of dragons to fly at midnight in search of a moment of intimacy. Taryn, though concerned, agrees to take Violet to the meeting, crossing the protections to a forested valley illuminated by the moonlight. When they reach the clearing, Taryn lands abruptly, followed by Scale with Zayden on board. As Zayden dismounts and prepares for the meeting, Taryn insists that Violet not dismount, reminding her of the risks they run being so close to Zolia. Violet, irritated but understanding his concern, stays mounted on Taryn. 7 griffins land, bringing their pilots with them. Recognizing Serena, the leader of the group, and 2 other pilots, Violet watches tensely. The interaction between Xaden and Serena is strained. Xaden hands over the daggers he brought, warning that the attacks on the outposts must stop. The young pilot named Kat, accompanying Serena, shows a defiant attitude and a look towards Xaden that reveals a shared past and possibly a deeper relationship. Xaden explains the importance of the protections and how the forging of weapons must be completed to continue supplying them with the necessary arms. The conversation reveals tensions and mistrust between the two groups, but also the urgency of the situation. Serena accepts the daggers with a promise to try to reduce the attacks, but warns that until they can openly acknowledge Xaden's help, it will be difficult to control all the flocks. The exchange concludes with Xaden's warning about the consequences of attacking Navarre's protections, making it clear that actions will have deadly consequences. As they fly back, Violet reflects on the complexity of relationships and alliances in times of war, and the revelation that Kat has a personal connection with Xaden adds another layer of uncertainty and emotion to their already tense relationship. Chapter 29. The flight back to Basgiath is heavy with guilt and nervousness for Violet. Taryn flies steadily, but the atmosphere is charged with tension. Violet feels overwhelmed by a mix of jealousy and anxiety, especially after confirming that Kat, the Griffin pilot, is Xaden's ex. Though she tries to reason that it shouldn't matter, she can't help but feel a pang of insecurity. Upon arriving at Basgiath, Violet dismounts Taryn and prepares to face the consequences of leaving without permission. The scene becomes complicated when she encounters Vice Commander Varish and his lackeys in the hallway of her dorm. The tension increases as Varish starts searching her backpack, and Violet fears they will discover the dagger she is hiding. At the crucial moment, Professor Kaori appears, intervening and challenging Varish's authority, defending Violet. With his intervention, Kaori manages to divert attention and dissuade Varish from continuing to search Violet, saving her from a potentially dangerous situation. After the tense encounter, Rhiannon, worried, drags Violet to her room along with Riddick and Sawyer. Violet, feeling she can no longer hide the truth from her friends, decides to trust them. She reveals that the dagger she carries is a weapon designed to kill Venom. The gravity of the revelation underscores the dangerous reality they all face. Chapter 30. Violet is forced to tell her friends the truth, from deciding to join Xaden during the war games to assassination attempts and smuggling weapons. However, she keeps the secret of where she woke up after being stabbed to protect Xaden and Brennan. Her friends listen with expressions of surprise and disbelief as she reveals the harsh reality facing the continent. Rhiannon confirms that Day was not killed by griffins, but by something much more sinister. The conversation turns tense when Sawyer points out that Violet allowed Xaden to lie for her. But the most shocking revelation is that some dragons are aware of the Venom threat, though not all are willing to act. Violet's confession leaves her friends in shock, but not angry with her. Rhiannon, though disappointed, shows understanding and gives her a hug, demonstrating her unconditional support. Riddick, on the other hand, mentions that the diaries of the first 6 might hold the key to creating protections, but those diaries are classified in an underground vault no one seems to have knowledge of. The idea of retrieving those classified diaries is dangerous, but necessary to understand how to protect the continent from the Venom. Meanwhile, training continues and Violet faces the Gauntlet with nervousness, worried about Sloane, Liam's sister. The Gauntlet concludes successfully for Sloane, and Violet's concern is slightly relieved. However, the tranquility is short-lived when she receives a note from Jazinia indicating she has found an important volume. Riddick offers to take over Violet's watch so she can meet Jazinia, but Violet decides to handle it herself. Upon arriving at the Academy Tower for her watch, Violet and Aya are attacked by 4 infantry soldiers. In a fierce struggle, Violet and Aya manage to take down some attackers, but Aya falls mortally wounded. Violet finds herself hanging from the edge of the tower, fighting for her life, when one of the soldiers tries to make her fall. At the last moment, someone throws a dagger that pierces the soldier's throat, saving Violet from a deadly fall. The identity of her savior remains a mystery, but their timely intervention gives Violet a second chance to fight. Chapter 31. Violet finds herself at the edge of the tower, fighting for her life. Just when it seems she will fall, someone pulls the soldier holding her, and she barely manages to grab onto the edge. Her savior turns out to be Jack Barlow, who helps her back up. Violet is immensely surprised to see Jack, whom she had presumed dead, now inexplicably saving her life. Jack, breathless from the effort, explains that he didn't know it was her but couldn't let a rider die at the hands of the infantry. Violet, still perplexed, prepares to defend herself if necessary, but Jack assures her that he only seeks redemption and that they are now at peace. With that, he leaves, letting her face the reality of what just happened alone. As Violet gathers her daggers and regains her composure, Riddick arrives, alarmed. She explains that Aya was killed by assassins sent by Eidos and that Jack saved her life. Riddick, shocked, ensures Violet isn't injured before informing her about Jazinia and the discovery of the real vault. Jazinia has found the vault they were looking for, but there's an obstacle. They need someone of King Tauri's lineage to bypass the protections. This makes Violet think of Prince Brennan, who could be the key to accessing the first 6 diaries and discovering how to create new protections. The night passes with a mix of adrenaline and determination, knowing that the path to truth and the continent's salvation requires more sacrifices and unlikely alliances. Chapter 32. The atmosphere in the small room was tense as Xaden and Violet faced off with intense stares. Xaden, with a clenched jaw, clearly displayed his anger. Violet, sitting at the edge of the desk, felt a pressure in her chest that barely allowed her to breathe. She tried to explain the situation with Rhiannon and the dagger, but every word seemed insufficient. After a long silence, Xaden began listing the problems with Violet's plan to sneak into the archives. They hadn't gotten the key participants' consent, and there were many risks involved. Despite everything, Violet's determination was firm. They needed that information to save themselves. In the end, Xaden relented, promising his support and warning of the dangers. Later, in the hallway, the group gathered. Riddick and Sawyer, surprised by Xaden's attitude, got up from the floor after falling against the protections. Eric, with a tense relationship with Xaden due to their family's past, showed his distrust. However, the need to steal something from his father convinced him to join the plan. Jazinia guided the group to the archives, warning that only 4 could enter to avoid suspicion. Once inside, they cautiously advanced through illuminated and empty corridors. In an empty classroom, Jazinia revealed a secret entrance to a spiral staircase. From there, the mission was to find and read the diaries that might contain the answers they sought before the archives closed definitively. The mission was fraught with danger, and any mistake could cost them their lives. As they descended the stairs, Xaden and Violet, accompanied by Eric and Imogen, felt the weight of the mission on their shoulders, aware that truth and their survival were at stake. Each step brought them closer to an uncertain fate, but Violet's determination and her companion's loyalty drove them forward without looking back. Chapter 33. Shadows covered the ceiling as Violet and her group descended a narrow staircase. Xaden, always alert, moved ahead to face the guards watching the hallway at the bottom of the stairs. Upon arrival, Violet felt the tunnel's dampness and metallic smell. The buzz of magical protections heightened the tension, but they had a clear goal: find 2 essential diaries. Xaden and Imogen handled dragging the guards, clearing the path. Violet, Eric, and the rest advanced until they reached a small circular library filled with shelves and a central pedestal. The magic protecting the entrance was intense, and upon crossing, Violet felt dizzy and nauseous. Eric, trusting his intuition, helped her enter, but Xaden remained trapped outside, furious and worried. Inside, Violet and Eric began searching among hundreds of books. Time was running out, and the tension increased. Each shelf seemed to hold historical tomes, but not the ones they needed. Eric, familiar with his father's pride, suggested looking at the central pedestal. After several failed attempts, they found 2 ancient tomes protected by magic. Eric, though suffering burns on his hands, managed to extract them. Time was pressing, and with barely a few minutes to escape, Violet and Eric, now injured, rushed to leave. Imogen, on guard, urged them with urgency, aware of the imminent danger of being trapped. The guards began to wake, and Xaden, with his shadow manipulation skills, kept the path clear. The group ran through the corridors, following the route traced by Jazinia. Bells rang, signaling that time was running out. The archive's door began to close automatically, and each chime brought them closer to the danger of being trapped. Despite the pain and exhaustion, Violet and her team ran without stopping. In a desperate effort, Xaden used his shadows to keep the door open long enough for everyone to pass through. In a final push, Violet crossed the door just before it closed with the 7th chime, narrowly escaping. With hearts still racing and bodies trembling, Violet and her team knew they had risked everything but also gained something invaluable: the diaries that might contain the answers necessary for their survival. Chapter 34. Xaden managed to pull Eric just before the door closed completely and the shadows dissipated on the floor. Violet, panting with her hands on her knees, tried to catch her breath while Rhiannon, radiant, bent to congratulate her. However, Xaden reminded everyone that the mission was not over and that they needed to dispose of the scribe robes. The group quickly organized. Jazinia anxiously asked if they had found the diaries, to which Violet nodded affirmatively. Imogen offered to take care of Nazia, while Sawyer handled the laundry. The blisters on Eric's hands were a clear sign of the sacrifice they had made. The new plan was to take Eric to a room to hide his burnt hands. Rhiannon needed to find Dyer in the infirmary to heal him discreetly. Jazinia would take the robes to the laundry to remove any trace of their infiltration. The group split up to avoid raising suspicion, and each followed their carefully planned path. Quinn explained how she had projected herself onto the astral plane to avoid being discovered, while the group crossed the infirmary and the bridge in silence. Bodhi and Sawyer went to the common area to ensure they were remembered, while Xaden and Violet headed to the courtyard. In the courtyard, Xaden and Violet allowed themselves a moment of intimacy. Xaden, with a hungry look, kissed her passionately. They both celebrated their mission's success, but knew there was still work to be done. Violet handed one of the diaries to Xaden to take to Brennan, while she kept the other. Although they wanted to spend the night together, they understood that dividing the diaries was the best option for their survival. Xaden, with the diary hidden in his jacket, prepared to leave. Violet watched him with a mix of sadness and determination, knowing they would see each other in 7 days. After a final kiss, Xaden left, disappearing into the night sky, while Violet felt a new hope bloom in her chest. Returning to the courtyard, Violet encountered Nolan, who offered her a cup of lemonade. Grateful for his gesture, she noticed something strange in the taste. Just as she began to feel dizzy, she understood the betrayal. Nolan, with a regretful expression, admitted he couldn't protect her from the consequences of her actions, and then everything went blurry. Upon waking, she saw Varish watching her with a malicious smile. The danger was not over, and Violet now faced a new challenge, trapped and betrayed by those she trusted. Chapter 35. Violet's head was spinning as she tried to focus her vision. She felt a throbbing pressure at the back of her neck, and upon opening her eyes, she could barely make out a smoke-blackened stone ceiling. The raspy voice of an unknown man and a woman's voice reached her from somewhere nearby. The humidity, the smell of iron, and the constant dripping revealed she was underground. Tied to a chair, Violet realized she had been captured. She tried to communicate with Tarn, but the bond was murky. She remembered Nolan's betrayal and knew she had been trapped. Upon opening her eyes, she saw Major Varish approaching with a malicious smile. Nolan, with a sad expression, only worsened Violet's despair. Varish began the interrogation. They wanted to know how she had stolen the diary, with whom she had done it, and why. Nora, a woman with the power to detect lies, confirmed that Violet was telling the truth when she said there was no way to know if the book was a reproduction. However, Varish was not easily convinced. Violet tried to use selective truths to protect her friends, knowing she was the only one captured. Varish, looking for any excuse to subdue her, began torturing her. He broke one finger, then another, relishing the pain he inflicted. Violet tried to dissociate from the suffering, but each moment was agony. Xaden's words, remembered in her mind, were her only source of strength. Liam, or a hallucination of him, appeared before Violet, encouraging her to resist. Each blow, each fracture, brought her closer to the brink of despair. But she was not alone in her mind. Liam's presence kept her sane, reminding her that she had to survive. Despite the pain, Violet clung to the hope that her sacrifice would be worth it if RTO was saved. After days of torture, Nolan brought Dane to the dungeon. The sight of her former friend filled her with fear. Dane, upon learning that Violet was being tortured, showed indignation, but his loyalty to Varish and his conviction that Violet was betraying Navarre led him to collaborate. Upon touching Violet's temples, Dane accessed her memories, reliving the painful scenes of war, Liam's death, and the secrets Violet had kept. Dane, horrified by what he had seen, finally understood the gravity of the situation. He decided to act against Varish, freeing Violet and threatening Nora. In the ensuing chaos, Varish was injured. As Dane helped Violet to her feet, a figure appeared and slit Nora's throat. It was Xaden, with eyes full of rage and determination. The situation was desperate, but Xaden's arrival gave them renewed hope. The fight for truth and justice continued, and with Xaden by her side, Violet knew they had a chance to survive and win. Chapter 36. Xaden had a fierce expression while holding a blood-stained sword and dagger, ready to attack Dane. Violet, weakened and staggering, tried to get between them, but her legs wouldn't respond, and she fell to the ground. Dane caught her as Violet struggled to stay conscious, feeling the support of Xaden's shadows. In a whisper, Violet asked him not to kill Dane, explaining that he had saved her life. Seeing Violet so shattered, Xaden carefully picked her up in his arms. Garrick appeared, commenting on the chaos unfolding above. Varish, injured but still conscious, accused Dane of treason. However, Xaden declared that Violet would decide Varish's fate. Despite her weakness, Violet used the dagger to end Varish, reminding him of the promise she had made. With Varish dead, Xaden and Violet faced the need to flee. Xaden promised to protect Violet at any cost, even if it meant losing everything he had fought for. Amid tears, Violet accepted his love, and they prepared to leave. While Dane helped Xaden prepare Violet for the journey, Garrick alerted them to a problem on the stairs. Lilith Sorrengail, Violet's mother, had arrived. Lilith, showing unusual concern, gave an antidote to Violet and explained she had not known about her torture. She revealed she had arrived just in time and requested a moment alone with her daughter. During the conversation, Lilith confessed she had made a deal with Xaden to protect Violet. She also admitted she had underestimated the relationship between Xaden and Violet, something she had never foreseen. As they ascended the stairs, Lilith explained she had forced Violet to join the Riders' quadrant to ensure her survival. Violet, facing the pain and betrayal, struggled to accept the revelation. Finally, Lilith told Violet she had to be strong and not depend on others to rise from the battlefield. Reuniting with Xaden, Violet realized the gravity of the situation. They decided that not only the marked but all cadets who wanted should have the opportunity to join their cause. As they organized, Dane called the formation and faced the professors, led by Carr. Bodhi demonstrated his ability to counter seals, stopping Carr. Finally, the arrival of a large flock of dragons changed the course of events. Devera, a wing leader, decided to join them, and within an hour, the flock of riders and dragons departed for Artia. During the flight, Violet, exhausted, clung to Terran's saddle. Upon arrival, she was greeted by her brother Brennan, who, worried and angry, demanded explanations. Barely able to stand, Violet promised Brennan she was fine and needed repair. With the help of Xaden and Brennan, she prepared for what was to come, knowing they had gathered a formidable group willing to fight for their cause. Second part, Chapter 37. Casa Ryerson, a mix between a palace and a barracks, is a fortress that has never been breached by any army. Throughout its history, it has survived numerous sieges and attacks before being consumed by the flames of the very dragons it served. Violet finds herself trapped in a recurring nightmare where the sage holds her in his personal torture chamber, threatening that she will never escape him. Upon waking, she realizes she is in Xaden's well-lit room in Artia, not a cold, bloodied cell. Grateful to be alive, she watches Xaden sleeping beside her, admiring his beautiful face and tattooed body. Taking advantage of the moment, Violet begins to kiss his back, tracing the scars representing Xaden's promises to the marked with her fingers. Xaden wakes up with a smile, and Violet continues kissing him, wanting to lose herself in him. Despite Xaden's warnings about her recovery, Violet insists she wants him to lose control. Their passion grows, and Xaden finally gives in, surrendering to Violet with intensity and passion. After an intimate moment, Violet and Xaden leave the room to find Casa Ryerson full of cadets. The presence of so many riders makes them question if they can accommodate them all. Rhiannon reports that they have been waiting for instructions since the morning. Xaden and Violet decide to meet with the assembly to discuss the situation. In the assembly, members are furious about the arrival of so many cadets and dragons, worried about Orisha's limited safety and resources. Xaden takes responsibility for the decisions made, declaring that Violet is his responsibility. The assembly is reluctant to accept the situation, but Xaden insists the cadets are their guests and that Casa Ryerson is his home. During the discussion, it is revealed that Xaden has a scar on his chest symbolizing his commitment to Violet and the Marked. Despite the tensions, the assembly finally accepts Violet and commits to finding solutions to arm their forces and train the cadets. As the discussion continues, Violet feels a sudden and powerful connection with Andarna, her dragon. The joy and relief of knowing Andarna is well fill her, completing her sense of purpose and determination. Chapter 38. The Artia Valley appears serene, almost untouched by time, although the winter air begins to manifest in the city below. In this landscape, Violet watches an impressive display of dragons, with two imposing creatures flanking the young Andarna. After whispering to Terran, she discovers that Andarna, despite her serene appearance, has recently awakened from a long draconic coma. Andarna, with her body still showing signs of her recent adolescence, wakes up and greets Violet with golden eyes full of life. Her size has increased, which causes astonishment in Violet, who notices a slightly greenish hue in Andarna's black scales, reflecting the autumnal surroundings. The interaction between the dragons shows the dynamics of their relationship, with Andarna eager to fly and search for food but facing difficulties with her left wing. This problem, caused by abnormal growth due to previous events, raises concerns in Violet. Taryn explains that Andarna needs to strengthen her muscles to fly properly, a situation that cannot be magically repaired. The scene shifts to the academic environment, where Violet, along with her fellow cadets, resumes their studies under the supervision of the Assembly and the Revolution. Although conditions are austere, with classes in makeshift classrooms, the cadets remain clean, fed, and focused on their learning. During a session in the reconstructed theater, the cadets prepare for a battle report. In a tense atmosphere, Riddoch and Sawyer comment on a map showing enemy movements in adjacent territories. Information about recent Benin attacks and the situation in Navarre adds a layer of urgency and danger to the situation. Suddenly, an alert about the approach of a flock of dragons causes chaos. Driven by concern, Violet runs to the main courtyard to face the situation. There, Tane, a green dragon led by Mira, Violet's sister, lands abruptly. The tension eases when Mira and Violet embrace, apologizing for past differences. The chapter culminates with the emotional reunion of the Sorrengail siblings, Violet, Mira, and Brennan, in a meeting filled with emotions and promises of mutual loyalty and protection as they prepare to face the challenges ahead together. Chapter 39. The atmosphere in Artia is tense. Violet bursts into the lobby, shouting orders to get ice for Brennan, who, with a broken nose from a punch by Mira, tries to stop the bleeding. Mira, full of anger and resentment, accuses Brennan of abandoning them for 6 years, allowing their family to suffer unnecessarily. The exchanges between the Sorrengail siblings are intense, and Violet, caught in the middle, feels like a small child again. In the midst of the conflict, Xaden appears, relieving Violet with his presence. They greet each other and share a moment of closeness despite the tense situation. Xaden jokes about the siblings, adding a touch of humor to the chaos. Later, Violet reveals her knowledge of how to raise protections for the valley. This requires the blood of the 6 most powerful riders. They form a group, including Violet, Xaden, Felix, Suri, Bodhi, and Brennan, and head to a secret chamber where the protective stone is located. The stone, an imposing black pillar, appears to be the key to activating the protections. Following the instructions in Warwick's diary, the riders cut their hands and let their blood flow over the stone. However, the stone does not respond. Frustration and disappointment fill the air, especially for Violet, who feels she has failed everyone. Xaden tries to console Violet, assuring her they will try again. Although Brennan and the others leave the chamber, Violet feels defeated but determined to find another solution. The group discusses strategies to obtain a Luminaria, a crucial source for their mission, but Xaden opposes putting Violet in danger, even if it means losing a tactical advantage. The discussion is intense, but Violet remains firm in her decision to help. Back at Casa Ryerson, Violet goes to Mira, seeking her help. She knows she needs support to carry out her plans and protect everyone in Artia. Violet's resolution is clear, and although family tensions persist, her determination does not waver. Chapter 40. Xaden flatly rejected Violet's proposal to go to Cordon, protecting her as always. However, determined and with her own plans, Violet wakes up alone, recalling the intense encounter with Xaden the previous night. Now, she finds herself on a mountainside with Felix, who trains her in controlling her power. Despite the difficulties, Felix shows her that she has immense potential but needs to learn to control and direct her power precisely. After several failed attempts, Felix gives her a crystal orb to help her channel her power safely, highlighting the importance of learning from the basics to avoid being a danger to those around her. With renewed determination, Violet, along with Mira and Brennan, decides to go to Corden in search of the luminaria they need for their mission. Despite the risks, they believe it is the only way to secure the necessary weapons to face the Venin. Upon arrival, they are escorted by a formation of griffins to Viscount Tecorus' palace. The impressive and luxurious structure contrasts with the urgency of their mission. Upon landing, they are met with a tense reception from the Griffin pilots, who demand a demonstration of sincerity before allowing them to see the Viscount. Violet, Brennan, and Mira declare their intentions honestly. Mira, in her direct style, threatens the pilots if they touch her sister, which, surprisingly, earns them some respect. Finally, the pilots allow them to approach, revealing a person dressed in black. To Violet's surprise, it is someone she did not expect to find, a figure from her past who now looks at her with disdain. The situation becomes even more complicated and dangerous, highlighting the precarious position they find themselves in while trying to secure Viscount Tecorus' help. Chapter 41. As they cross the guarded garden toward the palace of Tecorus, Violet chastises Xaden for treating her like a pet that can be left at home. Brennan reminds them to present a united front, yet the tension between them is palpable. Entering the gleaming white marble palace, Xaden informs Tecorus about their arrival. The opulence of the place contrasts with the urgency of their mission. Tecorus, a man with an easy smile and impeccable teeth, takes a particular interest in Violet and her ability to summon lightning. He declares that they won't discuss business until after dinner and provides them with appropriate attire. To Violet's surprise, their hostess is Catriona, a woman with a history with Xaden, sparking jealousy in Violet. As they prepare for dinner, Violet and Mira are assisted by Zara, an efficient maid. Violet dresses in an impressive black gown of woven leaves and Deverelli silk, contrasting with Catriona's elegance. Tensions escalate when Kat and Serena, another pilot, exchange biting remarks with the Sorrengail sisters. Serena seems more sympathetic, but Kat knows how to test Violet's patience. During dinner, Tecorus mentions Violet's impressive feat of dividing Basgiath in just 5 days, stirring feelings of guilt in her. Tecorus then leads them to an open-air amphitheater, where Violet must demonstrate her lightning ability, a necessary step before negotiating for the Luminaria. They face an unexpected challenge when Tecorus presents a metal chest, an ancient treasure of Xaden's father. Violet prepares for the trial as rain begins to fall. Just as she's about to demonstrate her power, the chest opens to reveal a Venin, a dark being with bloodshot eyes. Xaden shouts a warning, and the already tense situation turns into a life-or-death emergency. Chapter 42. The amphitheater becomes a battlefield as a Venin emerges from the chest. The situation quickly deteriorates. Violet feels panic, recalling the devastation these creatures can cause, but Taryn's voice pulls her out of her trance. With Mira by her side, they attempt to confront the Venin, but the creature proves to be a formidable enemy. The Venin, laughing maniacally, drains a guard, leaving him a dry husk. Violet tries to control it with her power, throwing lightning bolts that miss their mark. The rain and tension aren't helping, and Violet realizes she needs a better plan. Taryn, her dragon, is on his way, but may not arrive in time. In the midst of the battle, Mira, Brennan, and Violet coordinate to corner the Venin. Violet uses alloy daggers, the only weapons capable of killing these creatures, but the Venin remains a challenge. Her power, lacking precise control, turns the situation into a deadly game. Taryn arrives just in time to lift Violet into the air. From this vantage point, she unleashes a lightning bolt that charges the field's water, electrocuting the Venin and finally killing it. The relief of victory mingles with exhaustion. Violet has proven her power, but the fight leaves her drained. Back at the palace, the tension doesn't dissipate. Xaden, furious about the situation, confronts Tecris. Violet intervenes, reminding everyone that the negotiation for the Luminaria is essential. Tecris, intimidated but not defeated, offers an apology and proposes a negotiation. The offer is tempting but dangerous. Tecris wants the dragon riders to train the griffin pilots of his region. Brennan accepts the offer despite the complications it entails. The decision is made, and though Xaden and Violet continue to disagree on many things, the need for cooperation is clear. The responsibility of training the griffin pilots now falls on them, a challenge that could change the course of the war against the Dark Beings. Chapter 43. The ascent to the Draller Cliffs is a test of endurance and determination. The steep and treacherous path challenges both riders and pilots, and the uncertainty of the terrain heightens the tension between them. Brennan, with his resonant voice, reminds everyone of the importance of collaboration and mutual respect, but the skeptical glances among the groups reflect years of animosity that don't easily dissipate. Violet, feeling the weight of her backpack and the pain in her legs, moves forward determinedly alongside Sloane and Marin, a pilot who, despite her friendship with Kat, seems willing to work as a team. The Griffins, large and majestic, struggle to maintain balance on the narrow path, and each section traveled increases the tension. Marin comments on the difficulty of the ascent, worried about her Griffin, Dagilaire's, ability to continue as the altitude increases. The first few hours pass with a semblance of normality, but the situation complicates when they reach a pressure-activated trap. Dane, waiting by the trap, warns everyone of the danger, but crossing that section of the path requires a considerable jump. Riddick, with his usual skill, lodges a sword into the rock to help others cross, transforming the dangerous section into a sort of gauntlet obstacle. Despite feeling dizzy and exhausted, Violet manages to cross using the sword hilt as a support. Luella, the smallest pilot, follows her example, but tension rises when she nearly slips upon landing, pushing Violet and Vizia toward the cliff edge. In a desperate maneuver, Violet grabs both, but the combined weight drags her toward the edge. Riddick, bravely trying to help, is struck by arrows fired by the trap. With Vizia saved by her griffin and Luella hanging from her arm, Violet cries out in agony as she sees Riddick wounded. In a desperate call to Brennan, she seeks the help that might save her friend's life. Chapter 44. In the chaos of the mountain, Violet struggles to maintain her emotional and physical control as the situation rapidly deteriorates. Luella, a small and fragile pilot, loses her grip on Violet and falls into the clouds, disappearing without a trace. Pain and guilt flood Violet as Sibyllaire, Luella's griffin, mourns the loss with a heart-wrenching cry. The bond between the griffin and its pilot is unbreakable, and now both have fallen. In the midst of the commotion, Kat blames Violet for Luella's fall, but Marin defends Violet, arguing that Luella couldn't jump the trap. Dane, intervening, ensures that no one will touch Violet, highlighting the seriousness of the situation and the danger they all face. Meanwhile, Brennan arrives and begins treating Riddick, who has been gravely wounded by arrows. The pain in Violet's dislocated shoulder is intense, but with Dane's help, she manages to relocate it. However, the situation worsens when a wyvern emerges from the mist and takes Sibyllaire's lifeless body. The presence of the wyverns triggers panic among the riders and pilots. Tern, Violet's dragon, tries to maintain calm while guiding her up the cliff. Violet decides to confront the wyverns, knowing that her ability to manipulate energy might be their only hope. As the griffins and riders continue their ascent, Tern takes Violet through a series of maneuvers to draw the wyverns away from the others. In a risky move, Violet unleashes her power, projecting lightning downward and striking the wyverns. With monumental effort, She manages to eliminate 4 wyverns, saving the riders and pilots in the process. Exhausted but victorious, Violet returns to the cliff's edge where everyone else has gathered. Brennan and the others join her, and Violet reveals that the wyverns had no riders. However, her concern grows as she realizes that the Venin, the creators of the wyverns, now know of their presence and might be heading towards them. The connection between the Venin and the wyverns means their location has been compromised and a new threat looms over them. Uncertainty and fear grip the group, but Violet, with Tarn and Brennan's help, prepares to face the next challenge. The mountain has revealed not only its physical dangers, but also the threat of the dark beings lurking in the shadows. Chapter 45. In the frost-covered quadrant, days begin with the reading of the fallen's names. Major de Vera announces the names firmly, and for the first time, the dead are active riders and pilots, not cadets. Violet feels powerless, trapped in a cycle of studies while a real war rages outside. The pain of the losses is deeply felt, especially for those like Izar Panya, who has lost his brother. The mourning formation becomes a constant reminder of life's fragility and the conflict's brutality. Violet reflects on the cruelty of receiving this news daily, comparing it to Basgiath's harsh lessons. The dynamic in House Ryerson is tense, especially between Violet and Kat, who seems determined to make Violet's life hell. Fights are frequent, and conflicts between riders and pilots persist. Despite everything, Violet tries to maintain composure and focus on her tasks. The first snows fall in Artia, and the cadets adapt to the new conditions. Amidst the daily routine, Violet and her companions are summoned to a special class in the valley, led by Professor Trissa. The lesson is about runes, ancient knowledge that had been forbidden centuries ago. Professor Trissa explains that runes can be tempered with magic and used to perform specific actions. The class begins with skepticism and confusion. The cadets, both riders and pilots, must learn to separate a portion of their power to temper the runes. The task seems impossible at first, but under Professor Trissa's guidance, the cadets begin to understand the process. Violet, initially unsure, finally manages to weave an opening rune. Tensions between riders and pilots manifest when Riddoch, attempting to use his power, accidentally creates an explosion. Professor Trissa encourages them to keep trying, emphasizing the importance of learning this skill. The class ends with a significant achievement. Kat is the first to successfully weave an opening rune without errors. Though Violet feels a mix of envy and respect, she knows this is just the beginning of her learning in rune use. As the shadows of war loom over them, the Artia cadets continue to strengthen their skills, preparing for the challenges yet to come. Chapter 46. Amidst the chaos characterizing life in Artia, Violet sits at Xaden's desk, practicing the complex runes she's learned in recent weeks. The runes, ancient and powerful, can change the course of battle if used correctly. Xaden, recently returned from a mission, shows interest in her progress and offers his help, but his presence is more of a distraction than support at the moment. While Violet works on the runes, their conversation drifts towards the secrets of runes and weapons. Xaden reveals that the daggers he gave her have opening runes, capable of unlocking doors in times of need. The conversation turns more personal when Xaden shows her a stone with a protective rune created by his mother, Colonel Mary, intended to protect the children of fallen officers. This amulet was vital for the marked during their execution, creating a power bond that protected them. Days pass, and tension between riders and pilots intensifies. De Vera and the other instructors announce that the cadets will face off in duels to resolve their differences and that the rider squads will absorb the pilot flocks. This announcement causes a stir among the cadets, as squads are sacred and don't usually mix. Preparing for the inevitable confrontation with Kat, Violet feels uneasy. The enmity with Cat has been a constant since her arrival, and now they face off on the gym mat. Rhiannon and the others give advice and encouragement before the fight, reminding her to use the skills she has learned. The duel begins, and Violet realizes Cat fights with a technique familiar to her. Both have trained with Xaden, giving them an advantage and a challenge simultaneously. The fight is intense, but Violet, using her reflexes and knowledge, anticipates Cat's moves. The battle turns into a clash of skills and determination. Throughout the combat, Violet remains firm, recalling the advice of her friends and dragons, who suggest strategic targets to defeat Cat. The struggle continues with both contenders demonstrating their strength and agility until one finally gives in. Amidst the tension and violence, Violet finds a strange sense of clarity. The battle is not only physical but also a confrontation of wills and learned skills. The main lesson she draws is that true strength lies not only in the ability to fight but also in the capacity to learn and adapt to circumstances. Chapter 47. In an atmosphere charged with tension and resentment, Violet faces Cat in a duel. Both fight fiercely, every blow and move loaded with pent-up emotions. Cat, provocative and manipulative, tries to destabilize Violet by mentioning her past with Xaden. Cat's insinuation about her past relationship with Xaden, detailing intimate moments, ignites Violet's anger and jealousy, pushing her to the brink of losing control. As the fight intensifies, Violet realizes Cat is using mental tricks, manipulation that violates duel rules. Violet's anger and frustration grow, her vision blurs with rage, and the power bubbling inside her. The situation reaches a critical point when Violet, in a fit of fury, starts to choke Cat. Xaden's shout, watching from the mat's edge, calms her enough to release Cat. However, Violet's fury is so intense she unleashes a lightning bolt, impacting the surroundings and creating an atmosphere of panic and confusion. Xaden intervenes, taking Violet away from the scene. The scene ends with Xaden leading her to a private room to help her calm down, away from the other cadets and leaders' eyes. In the assembly room's solitude, Violet feels the shame and guilt of losing control, but also the need to understand how to prevent it from happening again. Xaden, firm and protective, promises it will pass, but both know Cat's mental manipulation is a serious problem they must face. Violet, filled with doubts and conflicting emotions, must find a way to control her power and emotions in an environment where betrayal and danger are ever present. Chapter 48. After the confrontation with Cat, Violet is furious and out of control. Xaden takes her to a private room to calm her and ensure she's not seriously hurt. Violet, filled with anger and humiliation, tells Xaden Cat's hurtful words, which made her feel like a worthless object. Xaden consoles her, assuring her he would always choose her over anyone else. In an attempt to distract and calm her, Xaden begins to undress Violet, leading to an intimate and passionate moment on the throne of Tyrande. As Xaden pleasures her, Violet realizes how much she needs him and how he always makes her feel special. Despite the moment of ecstasy, Xaden controls himself, not letting the situation get beyond what Violet can handle emotionally. After their intimacy, Xaden talks to Violet about Cat's manipulation, explaining that she can only amplify emotions Violet already feels. He urges her to regain control over her emotions and not let Cat's manipulation sway her. Xaden reminds her that the daggers he gave her last year have runes protecting her from Cat's mental tricks and that she should always carry them. Violet, still struggling with her insecurities, feels overwhelmed by the pressure of expectations and the responsibility of being a Sorrengail. Xaden encourages her to reconnect with herself and find her own control amidst the chaos surrounding them. He assures her that no one else, including Cat, can take her place in his life. Finally, Xaden and Violet prepare to return to their responsibilities. Xaden asks Violet to join him soon in bed that night, showing his desire to keep their connection strong and stable amidst the turmoil they face. Chapter 49. In the courtyard after formation, Imogen comments to Violet that she doesn't seem surprised by the integration of her squad with Kat's flock. Violet responds that it was expected, as her squad is the strongest and Kat's flock too. Rhiannon distributes green patches among her squad members to be given to the new members. Despite some, like Riddoch, being reluctant, Rhiannon insists it's the right thing to do. Violet is tasked with giving the patch to Kat, who shows resistance and disdain. Despite the tension, Violet manages to stay calm, recalling Xaden's words and the dagger's protection. When Kat tries to provoke her, Violet responds with calm and a clever retort, causing laughter among her companions. After this exchange, Violet and some squad members head to the library. Riddoch comments they needed to get away from Kat and that Violet was the perfect excuse. In the library, Violet reveals she needs to reconnect with herself and takes out some books from Tecarus that Xaden brought her. Dane arrives punctually to help Violet translate Warwick's journal. They work together in the protective stone room, where Dane corrects a wrong translation and reminds her Jazinia is a Moranian specialist, not a Crovlian. During their conversation, they face old wounds and resentments. Dane admits his mistakes and distrust towards Xaden, while Violet confesses her struggle not to hate him despite his actions. Dane helps imbue the protective stone, and Violet asks him to continue working on the journal together. Despite the tension, they agree to set aside past arguments to focus on the present and their mission ahead. Finally, Dane asks Violet if she's truly in love with Xaden, to which she responds affirmatively, reaffirming her commitment and love for him. Chapter 50. A week later, Felix congratulates Violet on her improved control over her power during training in a snowy landscape. Though she hasn't yet achieved the desired precision, her efforts are evident. Violet has been dedicating much time to translating Warwick's journal, imbuing stones in the protective chamber, and working with Dane. Despite the exhaustion, she continues with her training and studies. Felix teaches Violet to better control her power, comparing it to wielding a dagger instead of a war axe. He encourages her to channel her energy more precisely. Violet, initially unsure, begins to understand the need for a more delicate and refined control. As she practices, she feels a deeper connection to her power and growing confidence in her ability to handle it. After training, Felix mentions they need to meet Xaden in the assembly room at 5 o'clock. Violet feels unease through her bond with Xaden and worries about him. Returning to House Ryerson, she finds Garrick, Bodhi, and Heaton on the landing. Heaton has a bruise and his right arm is splinted, indicating a battle has occurred. Heaton informs Violet that the Venin have taken Pavis, a strategic city an hour east of Drathis. The news is devastating, especially when Garrick reveals that Naira Valderin, a veteran wing leader, has fallen during the mission. The situation's gravity becomes clear when they mention the Venin have advanced hundreds of kilometers, establishing Pavis as their base. Violet feels the imminent threat and the need to reorganize the wings and strategies. The war is getting closer, and the Riders' quadrant must adapt quickly to face this new and dangerous reality. Chapter 51. After hearing about the fall of Pavis, Violet heads to the 5th floor of House Ryerson, finding Xaden on the rooftop. The scene is bathed in the dying light of sunset, and Xaden, wrapped in shadows, seems lost in dark thoughts. Violet approaches with a plate of chocolate cake, hoping to offer tangible comfort. Though Xaden appreciates the gesture, the conversation quickly turns serious. Xaden reveals he was present at the Battle of Pavis, describing it as a vision of horror and despair magnified tenfold compared to Rezsun. He explains how the Venin outnumbered the Riders, making it clear that the situation is untenable. Violet, aware of the gravity of the situation, wonders what they can do to change the course of events. During their talk, Xaden admits that his presence in the battle was seen as a vulnerability due to his bond with Violet. This revelation weighs heavily on both of them, and Violet realizes that despite their strength, their connection makes them susceptible. The moment culminates in an exchange of words about their bond and the implicit promise to stay united until the end. A week later, Violet and Dane continue working tirelessly on translating Warwick's journal. Despite their progress, frustration mounts as they fail to find the solution to lift the protections. In a moment of revelation, Violet realizes they have misinterpreted a crucial word. What they thought was blood actually means breath. This new understanding changes everything, suggesting that the dragons, not the riders, are the key to activating the protections. Desperate to share her discovery and seek advice, Violet rushes to Rhiannon's room. Entering the simple shared room with a sense of urgency, she reveals to Rhiannon that she has found a way to lift the protections, but is unsure if they should do it. Chapter 52. The next morning, Rhiannon organizes a meeting at her sister's house. The residence, still smelling of new wood and paint, serves as a temporary refuge for the 18 members of the second squad. The atmosphere is tense, but there are also moments of warmth, like the exchange between Sawyer and Jazinia, who practice sign language by the fire. Despite the discomfort, Violet tries to ease the tension. The forced coexistence with the pilots has generated tensions, but it is also an opportunity to strengthen bonds. Even Kat, though still hostile towards Violet, shows signs of adaptation, sitting in a corner talking with Neve and Quinn. During the meeting, Violet addresses a crucial topic. The translation of Warwick's journal has revealed the key to lifting Orisha's protections, but this would mean the pilots would lose their ability to channel. This discovery needs to be shared with the pilots so they can make an informed decision. Rhiannon supports Violet, explaining that Orisha's safety depends on the protections, especially against the wyvern threat. The tension rises when Kat expresses her indignation, fearing that losing their ability to channel would leave them defenseless. Brajen, trying to calm Kat, asks when the protections will be lifted. Violet assures them that, although she wants to speak with the assembly as soon as possible, she is willing to delay the implementation so the pilots can decide whether to stay or not. The decision must be made with full understanding of the implications of staying and losing the ability to channel. To soften the news, Violet brings out 6 Marsite conduits, an explosive metal that has been imbued, offering the pilots an alternative means of defense if they choose to stay. The offer, while not solving everything, demonstrates the willingness to protect all members of the squad. That night, Violet has a recurring nightmare where the sage manipulates her to use her power. The sage's bony hand threatens her throat, and she wakes up startled, only to find comfort in Xaden's arms. 6 days later, the squad prepares for a training mission amidst the first snowfalls of December. The mission involves finding and closing hidden summoning runes in a section of the Western Mountain Range. The winning team will receive a weekend pass, an incentive that motivates all participants. Before leaving, Violet meets Xaden, who has returned from a mission in Drathis. The reunion is brief but intense, and Violet mentions needing to talk to him about something important. Though Xaden intuits it's about the protections, Violet insists on postponing the conversation until they can discuss it calmly. During the mission, Xaden asks for details about what they discovered in the translation. Violet explains that the 6 most powerful referred to in the journal are dragons, not riders. This discovery means Terran will be necessary to lift the protections, forcing Xaden to wait until they can talk further. Despite the tension, Violet focuses on the mission, determined to do whatever it takes to protect Artia and keep the squad united. Chapter 53. 40 minutes later, Violet, Kat, Sloane, and Vizia descend a snowy ridge toward a cave inaccessible to dragons, forcing them to go on foot. Andarna and Kiralair, Cat's griffin, accompany them, their light bodies barely disturbing the snow. Violet, always with her humor at the ready, apologizes to Cat after nearly causing an avalanche. Cat is surprised, used to Violet's cold demeanor. Andarna and Cat exchange jabs, with the conversation turning to Cat's arrogance, a trait Andarna mercilessly highlights. Finally, they reach the cave entrance. Taryn comments that dragons once inhabited these mountains, using the caves as winter refuges. Meanwhile, Cat receives an update from Kiralair about the competition, increasing the pressure to find and close more runes. Inside the cave, the lack of light becomes a problem. Cat reveals she has a torch and fire runes, but can't find the rune in her bag. Violet uses her power to illuminate the place, impressing the others with her ability. Cat, initially sarcastic, shows a rare approving smile. They advance in the darkness, Violet and Cat leading the group with the torch. Cat quickly deactivates a summoning rune, demonstrating her skill. However, as they return, Andarna detects a dragon scent. A terrifying roar echoes, and an orange dragon appears, scarred and threatening. In the ensuing chaos, Violet tries to protect Cat, but Vizia is fatally slammed against the cave wall. The dragon, identified by Taryn as Solas, opens its jaws, lighting up the cave with an orange glow. Violet, terrified and desperate, calls mentally to Taryn, aware they are in mortal danger. Chapter 54. A dark silhouette flies toward Violet and Cat, pushing them and causing them to become entangled. Violet clings to Cat, protecting her from the dragon Solas, aware of the importance of keeping her alive due to her royal lineage. Violet mentally pleads for help, knowing Xaden is out of reach, but trusting Taryn and Andarna can arrive in time. Kiralair and Sloane are also pushed toward them, and the cave is illuminated by Solas's fire. Andarna surrounds them with her wings, protecting them from the fire and ordering them to hold their breath. The heat is unbearable, but finally, the fire ceases, and they can breathe again. Cat hurries to extinguish Kiralair's flaming feathers while Andarna faces Solas. Violet tries to use her power but realizes she can't do so without endangering the others. In a desperate act, she throws 2 daggers at Solas, managing to wound him and creating an opportunity for Cat and Sloane to escape. Violet charges at Solas, using a broken piece of metal from the conduit to attack a vulnerable joint. Andarna distracts the dragon, but Solas throws her against the wall. Violet suffers a severe blow but manages to maintain control of her power. Solas finally falls, wounded by Cat's arrows and Violet's attack. Sloane reveals she accidentally drained Violet's power, manifesting her seal as an appropriator. Though scared, Violet calms her, and Andarna returns, covered in blood but alive. Taryn arrives just in time to pull Violet and the others out of the cave. Back in her room, Violet is tended to by a healer while Xaden arrives, worried. Cat explains that Violet saved her life, and Xaden is angry upon learning that Violet risked her life to save Cat. The argument intensifies, and Xaden reveals the depth of his concern for Violet, ending with a mention of the pact he made with Violet's mother, leaving palpable tension in the air. Chapter 55. Violet is angry and confused. She opens her mouth to speak, but closes it again. She reproaches Xaden for letting her spend months worrying about the scars her mother gave him without telling her the truth. Xaden responds that he was waiting for her to ask. Violet is furious because she feels he should have shared that information openly. Xaden reminds her that he had told her he wouldn't be completely honest with her, making Violet feel even more frustrated and confused. Xaden explains he won't apologize for a deal he made before knowing her, a deal he claims saved both their lives and allowed the pilots to receive weapons. Violet isn't angry about the deal itself, but about the fact that he hid it from her. She tells him that sometimes she feels she barely knows him despite being in love with him. The conversation grows more intense. Xaden tells her he needs Violet to trust him completely and stop being afraid of the answers. Violet realizes she may have been avoiding asking difficult questions for fear of the answers. In an attempt to prove his point, Xaden uses his power to pull a dagger from the closet and places it near Violet's throat, telling her to trust he won't hurt her. Though angry, Violet realizes she has to trust him. She asks about his second seal, suspecting Xaden has 2 seals due to his bond with Scale, a dragon that was also bonded to his grandfather. Xaden is left speechless, clearly impacted by the question. Before they can delve further into the conversation, Brennan urgently knocks on the door, informing them that a horde of wyverns is heading towards the cliffs. Xaden asks Violet if she's ready to lift the protections or if she prefers to wait for the wyverns to arrive at their doorstep. Violet realizes the gravity of the situation and prepares to make a crucial decision. Chapter 56. As they climb the hill, Brennan announces that the dragons are restless. Violet, Xaden, Rhiannon, and other assembly members follow, a palpable sense of urgency in the air. The wind howls, and storm clouds gather overhead, creating a tense atmosphere. Violet worries about the possibility of having made a mistake in translating the Protective Stone's runes. The work she, Dane, and Xaden have done to imbue the stone with energy seems to have worked, but its effectiveness remains untested. Chaos reigns in House Ryerson, where riders and pilots prepare for battle. Violet is ready to join Xaden in facing the approaching horde of wyverns. As they ascend, Violet reflects on her relationship with Xaden and the unanswered questions that remain between them. Upon reaching the top, Brennan reviews the journal translated by Violet and highlights the importance of the phrase about dragons and political power. Violet explains they need a representative from each lair to activate the stone. As the dragons unleash their fire on the stone, Violet feels a pulse of magic resonate through it, indicating the stone is working correctly. Despite the stone's activation, tension persists. Xaden and Violet head to a strategic point on the cliffs to monitor the wyverns' approach. Taryn informs them they have 15 minutes before the horde arrives. Xaden and Violet use this time to discuss Xaden's second seal, something he has hidden until now. Xaden reveals he can read people's intentions, a specific type of mind reader. This ability has allowed him to anticipate enemies' moves and know whom to trust. Violet feels betrayed and disconcerted by this revelation, but Xaden assures her he hasn't used his power to manipulate her. Before they can delve deeper into their conversation, the horde of wyverns arrives. Taryn and Scale, along with Xaden and Violet, prepare for the confrontation. Violet feels relief seeing the protections work, causing the wyverns to fall dead as they cross the barrier. After ensuring the threat has passed, they return to House Ryerson, where they are welcomed with joy by their companions. However, the celebration is interrupted when Brennan informs them that Melgren has requested a meeting with them. Violet knows this implies trouble, especially because her mother will also be present. Serena shows Violet she can still use minor magic, implying something is not working well with the protections. Violet feels overwhelmed by the accumulation of problems that need to be solved, but knows she must face them one by one. Chapter 57. Violet finds herself at the Athabine outpost, trying to process the revelations about Xaden's second seal. Despite her doubts and emotional pain, she recognizes that Xaden's sincerity in revealing his secret is a significant gesture of trust. Along with Xaden and a group of riders, Violet prepares for a tense meeting with Melgren and other Navarre leaders. Upon arrival, the group is met with an atmosphere charged with tension and suspicion. Violet cannot help but feel the irony and anxiety as she prepares to face Melgren. During the meeting, Melgren reveals that Navarre's forces are about to be overwhelmed in Samara, posing an imminent threat to the entire continent. Melgren's proposal is simple. They need the riders' help to avoid catastrophe, offering in return the promise not to interfere with Artia and its citizens. Melgren's offer is met with distrust and rejection from the riders, especially Ulysses, who declares they are unwilling to fight for a kingdom that has abandoned its people. Brennan intervenes, revealing his presence to his mother and adding more tension to the encounter. In the end, Melgren makes it clear that without the riders' help, Navarre is doomed. After the meeting, Violet's mother stays behind to talk privately with her daughters. She gives them a diary written in Moranian, which contains crucial information for fixing the protections. Despite doubts and distrust, Violet and Mira accept the challenge of translating and understanding the diary to protect Artia. During the flight back to Artia, Violet and Mira make a stop to investigate the wyverns' bodies. They discover the wyverns are marked with complex runes and that one of the stones is still active, buzzing. While examining the corpse, one of the wyverns revives, forcing Violet to use her power to eliminate the threat. The discovery of the runes and the active stone leads Violet to conclude that they need to solve the protection's mystery before it's too late. She knows relying on Jesinia for the Moranian translation is essential, and that their success or failure may determine Oricia's and the continent's fate. Chapter 58. Violet is determined to persuade Brennan to have the Assembly consider defending Samara. However, Brennan remains firm in his decision, leaving her frustrated and angry. Determined to vent her frustration, she heads to the gym, where she finds Xaden waiting for her on a training mat. Though surprised, she agrees it is a suitable place to discuss their problems, as no one will hear them there. Xaden explains he understands her anger and offers to talk about anything. Violet, still processing the revelation of Xaden's second seal, demands total honesty and the promise that he won't use his ability on her. Xaden agrees but asks in return that she trusts him and doesn't run away. After an emotional conversation, they both commit to being more open and honest. On December 19th, during a battle report session, Brennan reports no new attacks but reveals that the wyvern forces are concentrated on Samara's border, indicating they are preparing for the battle Melgren predicted. However, Violet has an epiphany. The wyverns are waiting, suggesting Samara is not the real target. She suspects the real target is Basgiath and the breeding grounds. Violet runs to inform Xaden and her squad. Despite doubts and discussions, Xaden trusts her intuition and decides to present her case to the Assembly. Violet, aware of the risks and implications of her decision, realizes they have no other choice if they want to avoid becoming what they most despise. Together, Violet and Xaden prepare to face the battle that could determine their world's fate, knowing their decision could cost them their lives, but also that it is the only way to protect what they value most. Chapter 59. 3 hours later, Violet finds herself in the valley center, overseeing the preparations for her unauthorized formation to head to Basgiath. Andarna insists she can fly alone, but Violet reminds her the flight is 18 hours and her muscles wouldn't hold out. Finally, Andarna agrees to use the harness so Taryn can carry her. As the cadets organize, Marin gives Violet a small crossbow with imbued Marsite-tipped arrows. Violet thanks her and prepares for the upcoming battle. Xaden returns with news that the Assembly will not support them, but Violet and her squad are determined to go to Basgiath. Brennan opposes, worried about the cadets' safety, but Violet and Mira insist they must act to protect the breeding grounds. The flight to Basgiath is long and cold, but the cadets advance without being stopped by enemy patrols. Upon arrival, Violet feels the familiarity of the rider's quadrant, though a heaviness in her chest remembering everything that has happened there. In the main campus, the dragons land one by one, and Violet heads quickly to the administration building's entrance. There, she meets her mother, who initially hesitates to let them inspect the protections. However, after a brief confrontation, she agrees to take them. The group descends a narrow, dark tunnel reminiscent of the archives, reaching a chamber where they find the bodies of 2 dead guards and Bade, Jack Barlow's dragon, attacking the protections. In a fierce struggle, Jack mortally wounds Bade, who spills his blood on the protective stone, breaking it and extinguishing the black flames. Basgiath's protections have fallen. The group, stunned, prepares to face the imminent threat, aware they are alone and in danger. Chapter 60. Xaden and Violet observe the devastated scene. The protective stone lies split in two, without flames, and Bade, Jack Barlow's dragon, is dead. Jack, wounded by Violet's dagger, staggers, his face showing a mix of confusion and triumph. Mira, watching the situation, remains in an attack position. Xaden tries to extract information from Jack, who reveals he has become Venin and that Navarre's magical protection is not as effective as they believed. Jack mentions the Venin have already infiltrated and are planning a massive attack. Xaden uses his shadows to contain Jack, while Dane tries to get more information, but Jack turns violent, and Xaden knocks him unconscious with a blow. The situation is desperate, and Dane reports the Venin will arrive in about 10 hours. They gather all the cadets in the battle report room. The cadets are divided between those who chose to fight in Poromil and those who stayed in Navarre. Dane reveals Jack left decoys that the Venin can follow to reach Basgiath, and the infantry is tasked with finding and destroying them. General Sorrengail organizes the defense in a grid of sectors, assigning each squad a part of the airspace. Violet suggests defending the broken protective stone, but her mother rejects the idea, arguing it is wrong. Xaden and Violet prepare for battle in the relative calm of Violet's room. Both struggle with the desire to stay together and forget the outside world. Rhiannon interrupts, reminding them of the urgency of the situation. Brennan arrives unexpectedly, ready to help. The pilots join the search for the decoys. Brennan and Violet discuss the possibility of repairing the protective stone. Violet decides they must protect the stone chamber, and Rhiannon formally requests permission to do so, obtaining it from General Sorrengail. The final battle approaches, and every second counts. Chapter 61. In the moments before dawn, Violet's squad prepares on the ridge overlooking the Basgiath campus. The first light barely illuminates the horizon when a horde of wyverns approaches, growing larger by the minute. Below, in front of Basgiath's gates, Violet's mother waits mounted on Aimsir with her personal squad, Mira and Tane at her side. Tern, nervous, warns Violet that the wyverns are coming. Squadrons 3 and 4 deploy along the mountain while Squadrons 1 and 2 defend the valley's perimeter. Violet and her squad protect the airspace over the main campus and the entrance to the stone chamber where Brennan works to repair it. And Darna, though initially refusing to leave, promises to watch from the shadows. Rhiannon, anxious, compares her fear to what Violet felt at Rasun. Violet, equipped with a dozen daggers, a hand crossbow, and more weapons, braces for the battle. As tension mounts, Xaden, to her left, reminds everyone to maintain their formation and trust the plan. Combat is imminent, and Violet feels the pressure of accumulated energy inside her, ready to channel it into electrical attacks. The first wave of wyverns arrives, and with Tern's help, Violet unleashes a lightning bolt that takes down several enemies. However, the wyverns quickly adapt their tactics, dodging the cloud cover Violet uses to strike. As the battle intensifies, Violet, Xaden, and their squad fight fiercely against the wyverns and their Venin riders. Violet uses her electric power to down the wyverns, but the number of enemies is overwhelming. During the fight, Tern warns Violet that she's exhausting herself, but she refuses to give up, knowing her friends' and loved ones' lives depend on her endurance. The battle rages on, and Violet keeps fighting, taking down wyverns and venom with precision. Despite her fatigue, Violet's determination is unwavering. The venom seek out weaknesses and launch coordinated attacks, but Basgiath's riders resist valiantly. Amid the chaos, Violet faces a young venom who threatens to kill her. Bravely, Violet defends herself, throwing her dagger at the enemy. Just when it seems the venom has the upper hand, Rhiannon leaps from Fjord to aid Violet. The battle continues with renewed hope as Basgiath's riders fight to protect their home and resist the venom invasion. Chapter 62. In the midst of the battle, the chaos intensifies as a venom attacks Violet and her friends. The scene becomes desperate, and Violet fears losing Rhiannon as she lost Liam. As they fall, Violet struggles to free her stuck belt while watching Rhiannon fight the venom with agile and precise movements. In the end, Violet helps Rhiannon stabilize, and the frantic battle continues. Meanwhile, Violet's mother and her squad fight fiercely against the approaching wyvern horde, and Taryn takes Violet to help Riddick, whose dragon Aetrum is being attacked by several wyverns. The combat escalates, and Violet faces the difficult decision of saving Sawyer, who is being devoured by a wyvern. Bravely, Violet jumps off Taryn's back and rescues Sawyer, though he is gravely injured. Back on the ground, Violet tries to save Sawyer's life while desperately calling for help. Marin and other pilots arrive to take Sawyer to the healers. The tension rises as Violet faces another venom, this time accompanied by Cat. The venom, named Wynn, threatens to drain the ground they stand on, forcing Violet to use her power to stop her. The situation worsens when a more powerful dark being appears and lifts Violet off the ground with a simple gesture, leaving her immobilized. Desperation overwhelms Violet, but just when it seems all is lost, a silhouette on the cliff, Andarna, launches herself at the dark being. Chapter 63. The tension in the air is palpable as the battle continues, and Violet finds herself at a decisive crossroads. The dark being turns to face her, but before it can react, Andarna, in a surprising display of power, incinerates it and rips off its head. Violet, in shock, staggers while trying to process what she just witnessed. Andarna, proud of her feat, assures her she knows how to hide and will always be there to protect her. Chaos persists on the battlefield, and Taryn lands beside them, impressed by Andarna's abilities. However, the situation remains dire. Melgren, Xaden, and other leaders are immersed in a strategic debate about defending the valley. Violet and Xaden oppose leaving the stone Brennan repaired unprotected, arguing it can still be imbued with power and raise the protections. Melgren insists on mobilizing all cadets to the valley, leaving the rest of the place unprotected as a distraction tactic. In the midst of the discussion, Jazinia arrives with a crucial revelation. She has found a discrepancy in the diaries that could be key to raising the protections. Despite initial resistance from her mother and Melgren, Violet insists she must try. Finally, her mother agrees to give her a chance. Violet and Xaden prepare to go to the stone while the wyvern horde waits in the sky, seemingly waiting for something or someone. Xaden takes Violet's hand, and with unwavering determination, they set out to buy the time needed for Violet to imbue the stone and save everyone. The battle isn't over, but there's a glimmer of hope as they advance towards their destiny, ready to face whatever comes. Chapter 64. Amidst the battle, Violet feels a mix of fear and determination as she faces the reality of death and chaos surrounding her. Xaden reveals that the wyvern horde is waiting for a dark being, a venom, who is the master that escaped from Rez's son. This heightens Violet's urgency to raise the protections and save everyone present. Violet finds herself at a crucial decision point, raising the protections in Basgiath or another important location. Xaden encourages her to protect where they are, because if everyone dies, the knowledge will be lost anyway. With a heavy heart, Violet decides to move forward and seek the help of the largest dragon, Kodaf. Kodaf, who has remained silent, finally agrees to help her, but Tarn intervenes, demanding to know what's happening. Violet convinces Tarn to stay with Xaden and protect him while she rushes to the protective stone chamber to try and imbue it with power. Running through Basgiath, Violet navigates corridors and stairs, dodging soldiers and squads, until she reaches the chamber. There, she finds Brennan, exhausted from repairing the stone. Without wasting time, Violet begins to imbue it with power but realizes it's not enough. Amid the effort, Andarna reveals she is of a 7th dragon species, unique in her kind, making her feel a deep connection with Violet. With Andarna's help, Violet continues to imbue the stone until her body starts burning from the effort. Her mother appears in the chamber, and Violet, weakened, can barely stop her when she realizes her plan. Violet's mother forces Sloane, an appropriator, to transfer her power to the stone, sacrificing herself in the process. As Violet watches helplessly, her mother dies, and Sloane activates the protections, enveloping the stone in black flames. With her mother's sacrifice, the protections finally rise. Violet, devastated by the loss, can barely move as her mother is carried out of the chamber. Andarna blocks the entrance, containing the flame that burns in the protective stone. The sacrifice of her mother weighs heavily on Violet, who now must face the reality of her death and the burden of saving everyone else. The protections are up, but the cost has been immense. Chapter 65. In the echoing chamber of the stone, tears stream down Violet's cheeks as she watches Brennan, with slow and jerky movements, cover their mother's body with a flight jacket. The pain of the loss permeates the air, and the sound of dead wyverns hitting the ground mixes with the siblings' grief. Tarn assures Violet that Xaden is still alive. This promise is the only thing keeping her upright, guiding her through a narrow, blurry passage while her mother lies dead. Victory resounds around them, but Violet can't join the celebration. All she feels is deep sadness and confusion. As she steps into the courtyard, Rhiannon finds her and envelopes her in a hug. Despite the pain, Rhiannon confirms that the wyverns fell from the sky and the venom fled. However, the victory is bittersweet for Violet, who feels the weight of her mother's death. Violet heads towards Tarn and Scale, anxious to find Xaden. Reaching the cliff's edge, she finds Xaden, his back cut but alive. He tells her he has killed the sage, severing any bond he might have had. Though he has won, he can't stop staring at the river, waiting for the sage's body to resurface. Xaden pulls away when Violet tries to comfort him but assures her he has saved her. Violet reveals how her mother sacrificed herself to save them, forcing Sloane to channel Aimsir's power into the protective stone. Both share deep pain, and Xaden is understanding, though he acknowledges the complexity of his feelings towards Violet's mother. Melgren wants them to return home, but Xaden resigns himself to understanding that Basgiath, with its intact protections, is the safest place for Violet. However, during their conversation, Xaden reveals something that terrifies Violet. A faint red circle emanates from his eyes, suggesting something dark and dangerous has awakened in him. Realizing the extent of this new fear, Violet faces the terrifying possibility that the man she loves might become a threat. The chapter ends with this unsettling revelation, leaving Violet in a state of deep confusion and fear. Chapter 66. A letter from Lieutenant Colonel Nolan Colbersey to General Lilith Sorrengail revealed a bitter truth. There was no cure, only control. On the battlefield, Xaden feels pain in every fiber of his body as the sage keeps him suspended in the air, powerless. The power that once made him feel invincible now consumes him, leaving him on the brink of exhaustion. The sage, merciless, verbally tortures him, reminding him that magic always demands balance and taking too much can lead to destruction. The sage offers Xaden one last chance to surrender, but he resists, channeling all his remaining power in a desperate effort to save Violet, who struggles to raise the protections. However, the sage, with a cruel smile, threatens to drain Violet if Xaden fails. Fueled by fury and fear, Xaden realizes his enemy is too strong. In an act of desperation, Xaden feels a flow of power beneath him and channels it, willing to sacrifice everything to protect Violet. The effort is extreme, but he achieves a brief victory. However, the sight of Violet, asleep beside him, reminds him how close he came to losing her. Slipping silently into the night, Xaden dresses and leaves the room without waking Violet. Enveloped in shadows, he heads to Basgiath's tunnels, avoiding guards and cadets as he delves into the darkness. His destination is clear: Jack Barlow's cell. Facing Jack, Xaden demands to know how to get rid of the dark power consuming him. Jack, with a sarcastic smile, assures him there is no cure, that the power they have taken is permanent and they will always crave more. The idea of becoming one of the Venom, the enemy, fills Xaden with fear and hatred. Jack taunts him, saying they are now like brothers, united by the same dark fate. Xaden realizes he is trapped in an internal struggle where the power that once made him strong now threatens to destroy everything he loves. The battle isn't over, and the true enemy may be himself. Thank you for joining us on this literary journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more illustrated summaries of your favorite books. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it and share it with your friends. Which character intrigued you the most in this installment? What are you hoping to see in the next book of the series? Leave your answers in the comments. See you next time.